We are getting to the session called Impact of Geopolitical Instability on Workers' Rights and Labour Markets in the EU, and Impact of Increasing Defence Budget on Welfare State, Social Security Systems and Workers' Rights. You know that it's an issue that came up from the debate about our priorities for the next 2 years. And I mean, it's extremely topical. So, distinguished guests, colleagues, everyone, we are here to discuss this topic. And it appeared already that defense is an uncomfortable topic among trade unionists. Trade unions strive for peace because we know it is workers who are sent to die in war. As we speak, workers are already paying the price of it in Ukraine, in Iran, in Palestine, and in many other places. Some with their wallets, some with their rights and freedoms, some with their lives. The only ones who always win wars are the weapon manufacturers, and this we must not forget. For a long time, defense, security and geopolitics have been sitting on the fringes of our political debates. Thank you so much. That was not needed. We sponsored soft power and we left the hard one to the US, hoping for them to be the gentle overlord. If we stayed on the side and limited ourselves to strongly worded letters, maybe the bombs would just keep falling elsewhere over people that are not us. Basically, we are not interested in war, and we all know it. But war is interested in us. We are not the ones bombing Hormuz, but we will suffer plenty of consequences as the world slides more into chaos. In writing cannot be ignored anymore. The reaction of the EU rejecting being involved in this madness is a very positive sign. But we need more assertiveness because it took time and courage from some national leaders to begin the push. Europe is already the second largest defense expender in the world. Please let this sink in. We have over 2 million soldiers and surpass or match even the US on numbers on many fields. However, we have little to show for it. Barely 40,000 to 60,000 troops are ready to be deployed out of 2 million, and only a fraction of our equipment is operational. Maybe what we need is more coordination, and we need to agree on the goal. Large sums of public money poured blindly into defense companies may bring erratic results, but will surely benefit their shareholders. The debate goes beyond what weapons or what for that. There is a matter of public or private ownership of defense firms, of monopolies, of workers' rights in the military. There is a role of civil society in the civil defense to be considered. And there are ethical questions to be considered for defense workers. And there is an elephant in the room of the American nuclear umbrella, the French offer to extend theirs, non-proliferation, and political and ethical choices to be made. Friends, I know for sure this is not the topic I would prefer to discuss. The EU is a project of peace. It must continue to be a project of peace. But we cannot be naive about our environment. We are stuck between a rock and a hard place. The green transition is incomplete and in jeopardy from regressive forces, and it is needed now not just for environmental reasons, but also for autonomy and sovereignty ones. Workers are on the edge in most of the EU, with low wages, high living costs, rising inflation on basic products, and threats of automation. The geopolitical instability is not just a direct security and defense risks or a potential economic crisis. It also points at key vulnerabilities our countries have. Almost all our payment systems are made via 2 American companies. Almost all our administration, our hospitals, schools, firefighters, our soldiers, factories, offices, they run on American software and American cloud-based technology. I'm actually happy today to have parliamentarians, trade unionists, academics to discuss these issues in depth within our group. And this will feed, as I mentioned already, into our political positions. And I invite you to venture off the beaten track because this open discussion is lacking in Europe and might as well start here. So how do we envision the EU as a force for peace in the world? And what tools do we need for that? How can we achieve real independence in case we are really interested in being sovereign? Or do we want to remain vassals of the US and hope the next overlord will be a benevolent one? Is all a zero-sum game between cannons and butter, or are there other options? How can we ensure that protecting European citizens does not end up being simply a large transfer of wealth from their pockets to defense companies' shareholders? How can we articulate a democratic mandate in the EU for such a daunting task? Just with this brief introductory remarks, I'm looking forward to the intervention of our 2 guests, and I'm happy to give the floor now to the member of the European Parliament, José Cepeda. Well, very well. From the S&D Group, so we already met this morning. Then to be followed by Claes-Mikael Ståhl, the Deputy Secretary General. Welcome, Michael, also. So I'm asking both of you basically to set a scene for the debate, to the questions I already mentioned, for us to have a really good debate on the issue and to have something we could then bring back home when the debate is over. Okay. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucie. Well, I prefer to speak in Spanish, please, para entendernos un poco mejor en la lengua de Cervantes. Primero, Lucie, muchas gracias, muchas gracias por haber podido permitir, ¿no?, el tener este encuentro entre parlamentarios y entre el grupo de los trabajadores del Consejo Económico y Social Europeo, porque es muy importante que estemos coordinados. Compartimos valores, compartimos un trabajo objetivo que nos queda por delante y quiero que sepáis que todos los que estamos en el Parlamento Europeo estamos también a vuestra entera disposición, ¿no?, para tener esa coordinación y que también estos marcos legislativos que en muchas ocasiones la derecha nos quiere imponer, pues en cierta medida intentar evitarlos, ¿no? Empezamos la legislatura con una visión por parte de Ursula von der Leyen, no solamente en el diseño de la propia Comisión, donde obviamente la inmensa mayoría de los comisarios son del Partido Popular Europeo, sino que empezamos con un mensaje, ¿no? Y era el mensaje de vamos a intentar simplificar, porque hay un gran aparato de burocracia europea que impide la competitividad, que impide a nuestras empresas. Entonces vamos a intentar simplificar. Bien, nos empiezan a traer ómnibus y bajo la excusa de la simplificación administrativa, pues al final acaban intentando empezar a, pactando muchas cosas con la ultraderecha, empezar a desregular, ¿no? Y es ahí donde, lógicamente, empezamos a lanzar una serie de alertas. Ahora, la evolución de la ultraderecha en cada proceso electoral dentro de la Unión Europea, en cada uno de los países, es obvio, es una obviedad, aunque acabamos de tener algún referéndum en Italia alentador, todo se ha dicho de paso, pero es verdad que vemos cómo la ultraderecha va creciendo, ¿no?, en cada uno de los países bajo el lema del miedo, ¿no? El miedo es un gran movilizador social, también electoral. Y es verdad que la ultraderecha está utilizando el miedo para intentar fragilizar las estructuras democráticas de nuestros países, ¿no? El miedo a que vienen los inmigrantes, el miedo que va a haber una gran guerra, el miedo es un gran movilizador. Claro, frente a eso, Al final, las organizaciones de izquierdas, los partidos políticos de izquierdas, los sindicatos, la parte social, los trabajadores, hablamos de derechos, hablamos de libertades y hablamos de construir un auténtico sistema basado en la esperanza, ¿no?, de millones de trabajadores. Quiero decir, eso no es tan potente, si me permitís un poco el balance, ¿no?, aunque sea narrativo, desde el punto de vista operativo en las campañas electorales, ¿no? Y es ahí donde parece que nos están intentando ganar la partida. Yo creo que han cometido un pequeño error, basándose toda esta estrategia también en el señor Donald Trump, ¿no?, y sus secuaces, intentándolo desarrollar por tierra, mar y aire en toda Europa, ¿no?, una visión con think tanks, metiendo muchísimo dinero, ¿no?, en grupos de pensamiento y todo este tipo de cosas. Han cometido un pequeño error, y es que no se han dado cuenta que la sociedad no es tonta, ¿no? Por mucho que manipulen las redes sociales, por mucho que los algoritmos los intenten desarrollar para generar una nueva forma de opinión pública, sobre todo, por ejemplo, los segmentos de la población más joven, ¿no?, no se han dado cuenta que nadie quiere que haya guerras en sus territorios, ¿no? Los intereses que están moviendo a secuestrar y directamente poner en marcha a un presidente en Venezuela, ¿no?, o arrasar Irán con bombas bajo las órdenes operativas de Netanyahu, primero en Gaza, ahora en Líbano, en fin, tiene unos intereses que nada tienen que ver con los intereses de la mayoría de la sociedad. Y es que yo creo que ahí es donde está el quid de la cuestión. Somos una amplia mayoría social de trabajadores y trabajadoras sobre los que tenemos que empezar a implementar un cierto trabajo pedagógico para intentar trasladarles a la sociedad que no sé si a lo largo de las últimas décadas en la reivindicación de esa Europa social hemos tenido más o menos éxito desde el punto de vista político, ¿no? Pero lo que sí es evidente que desde luego el éxito no puede pasar por incentivar guerras donde el único interés de estos señores tiene que ver con intereses netamente comerciales, netamente económicos. Están al margen de las necesidades sociales o de lo que la gente quiere o cree, ¿no? Así que yo creo que en ese sentido tenemos que seguir evolucionando y dar seguridad. Tenemos que dar seguridad a nuestra gente, a los trabajadores. El concepto, yo que estoy en la Comisión de Seguridad y Defensa del Parlamento Europeo, claro, nosotros, con la actitud que está teniendo Donald Trump, desmantelando las grandes organizaciones internacionales, Naciones Unidas, poniendo en solfa el multilateralismo, colocando en cuestión cualquier sistema, ¿no?, que desde la Segunda Guerra Mundial ha venido protegiendo el derecho internacional, vamos, no es menor cierto que, desde luego, eso está conllevando a que Europa, nos hemos dado cuenta, en algo sí que lleva razón Donald Trump, y es que Europa no tiene sistemas de defensa en caso de una posible agresión. Cuando vemos la frontera con Ucrania, la frontera del este, cuando vemos la presión también social que existe en Polonia, por poner un ejemplo, ¿no?, del miedo a la guerra más cercano, nos estamos dando cuenta que, claro, de repente vemos a países que están empezando a invertir mucho dinero en defensa, mucho dinero en defensa. A nosotros, en fin, que estamos, por ejemplo, desde España con el presidente Sánchez, claramente colocándonos en una posición distinta, antibelicista, pero tampoco ingenua. Evidentemente, hace falta desarrollar un sistema de seguridad y de defensa en Europa que no existe hoy. No existe, lo hemos venido dejando de desarrollar durante décadas. Y es lo único que le doy la razón al señor Trump. Bien, pues en eso sí que nos tenemos que poner las pilas. Por lo tanto, hablar de la defensa y de la seguridad sí que lo tenemos que hacer. Yo sinceramente creo que desde una posición de izquierdas no podemos evitar el defendernos y sobre todo el proteger nuestras sociedades y nuestras democracias. Ojo, que la guerra hoy se hace de muchas maneras, no solamente lanzando bombas, no solamente invirtiendo en tanques o en barcos de guerra o directamente en misiles. No, la guerra hoy se hace de una forma también, como lo estamos viendo también desde la Casa Blanca, una guerra económica, clarísimamente, que Europa se está defendiendo, abriendo nuevos espacios en Mercosur, en India, esta misma semana con Australia. Es decir, hay formas de hacer la guerra de muchas maneras para desestabilizar los países, nuestras economías y fragilizar a los de siempre, porque al final cuando hay una guerra del tipo que sea, siempre la pagan los de siempre, ¿no?, que son nuestra gente, que son los trabajadores. Así que tenemos que hacer una cierta labor pedagógica en ese sentido. Tenemos que hablar de la defensa sí, pero de la seguridad. Invertir en seguridad de una forma mucho más holística, mucho más amplia. Tenemos que hablar de la seguridad, de salvaguardar los derechos de los trabajadores. ¿De impulsar una industria de la defensa? Sí, ¿por qué no? Yo no estoy en desacuerdo que se desarrolle una industria de la defensa, pero para dar una mejor formación a nuestros trabajadores, que tengan más recursos, que se generen más puestos de trabajo de alta calidad e industrial, porque claro, cuando hablamos de los sistemas de defensa estamos hablando también del desarrollo de un modelo industrial que hasta la fecha lo habíamos derivado a otros lugares. Es que en Europa en los últimos tiempos hemos estado derivando muchas cosas a otros lugares. La capacidad industrial lo hemos derivado a China, la capacidad casi de investigación intelectual y tecnológica lo hemos derivado a Estados Unidos y prácticamente nos hemos quedado en algo maravilloso. Decía esta mañana en la reunión con el Grupo Socialdemócrata que, en fin, al final la idea de esa Europa social, al final esa gran idea de que cualquier persona que venga a Europa va a poder trabajar con derechos, pero también dignamente, nos estamos quedando como una isla en el mundo. Uno mira a China, con todo mi cariño, es un modelo donde no hay libertades, no hay derechos, no existe nada, más que el régimen del Partido Comunista Chino, con todo mi respeto, pero que no tiene nada que ver con el modelo europeo, ¿no? Uno mira a Rusia y evidentemente tampoco tiene nada que ver con y lamentablemente estamos viendo cómo la evolución de Estados Unidos va a unos lugares donde nada ni nadie nos esperábamos hace tan solo una década, ¿no? Que hablábamos de la democracia más solvente del mundo. ¿Dónde está la democracia norteamericana hoy, que es capaz de arrasar países o de saltarse cualquier derecho internacional, ¿no? Sin respetar los derechos humanos en ningún sitio, ¿no? Quiero decir, Europa es una isla hoy de derechos y de libertades, pero lo tenemos que fortalecer. Y tenemos que hablar, claro que sí, ¿por qué no?, también de la seguridad y la defensa. Pero decía de una forma mucho más holística, tenemos que hablar de nuestros investigadores. Cuando hablamos de seguridad y defensa, a mí me gusta decir que tenemos que invertir mucho más en nuestras universidades, en nuestros sistemas públicos, por ejemplo, educativos. Que nuestros investigadores, no, después de haber invertido mucho en que se forme nuestra gente en nuestras universidades en toda Europa, acaben trabajando en Estados Unidos. No tiene mucho sentido. Menuda inversión hacemos, ¿no? Por lo tanto, claro que tenemos que hacer el concepto este que acariciamos una y otra vez en el Parlamento Europeo de la autonomía estratégica, ¿no? Es que ahora tenemos que invertir en Europa. Tenemos que desarrollar nuestra propia autonomía estratégica. Pues invertir en nuestra propia autonomía estratégica estamos hablando de invertir en universidades, de invertir en sistemas sanitarios públicos, donde al final incluso las farmacéuticas, como hemos visto en la pandemia, tengan también patentes y desarrollen investigaciones en Europa. Y estamos también hablando, por ejemplo, de sistemas de transporte que tengan que coexistir y cohabitar en el ecosistema completo europeo, que estamos dándonos cuenta también, hablando de la seguridad y la defensa, que no tienen nada que ver unos países con otros. Hoy la gran debilidad europea es la gran disociación de los 27. Y yo creo que tenemos que seguir trabajando cada vez de una forma más unidos para hacernos más fuertes frente a todas estas grandes amenazas que nos rodean. No me importa hablar de la seguridad y la defensa, pero tenemos que hacer también una incisión en una mayor cultura de la seguridad y la defensa, fortaleciendo los derechos de nuestros trabajadores. No busquemos más excusas. Si la excusa de la burocracia que inició Ursula von der Leyen al inicio de este mandato, de repente rápidamente empezamos a ver que buscaba desregulaciones, no podemos ahora tampoco buscar la excusa de la guerra, valga la broma, el miedo a la guerra, para acto seguido decir que nos vamos a cambiar todos los presupuestos europeos y vamos a hacer desaparecer la cohesión social. O algún iluminado o iluminada dice que vamos a crear un ómnibus social. No, ni un solo paso atrás en los derechos sociales adquiridos. Si uno de los grandes pilares que queda por delante por desarrollar en Europa es el pilar de lo social. La moneda única, qué bien, nuestra economía, fantástico. ¿Y dónde está la Europa de lo social? No hemos avanzado tanto realmente. Nos queda mucho camino por delante. Hasta hace 4 días estábamos trabajando mi compañero Danielson y yo, que también los dos venimos del mundo de los sindicatos, ¿no?, en cada uno de nuestros países. Hemos venido trabajando con el tema de la subcontratación en cadena, bajo el riesgo de que con esta excusa iban a perder miles de trabajadores derechos por trabajar en un país o en otro con subcontrataciones opacas, por poner un ejemplo, ¿no? No, eso no nos lo podemos permitir, no lo vamos a permitir. Así que es verdad que tendremos que hacer mucha pedagogía sobre un modelo mucho más amplio de la seguridad para que tampoco nos vean de una forma ingenua que nosotros no queremos proteger nuestras sociedades. Claro que vamos a proteger nuestras sociedades, claro que vamos a proteger nuestras democracias. Y por último, la última forma de hacer la guerra, obviamente, es la guerra híbrida. Un nuevo modelo donde la mentira, los bulos y la desinformación, junto con los algoritmos de los grandes tecnomangantes norteamericanos, pues resulta que están dando la vuelta a la opinión pública en nuestros países y en nuestras regiones, ¿no? También tendremos que trabajar mucho en la educación de las redes sociales, en la educación de todos los productos tecnológicos y, como decía esta mañana, a mí me preocupa muchísimo la evolución, me gusta casi más decir involución, de la inteligencia artificial agéntica, donde ya las máquinas van a tomar decisiones por sí mismos. No, tenemos que volver a poner en el valor el ser humano y que la tecnología esté al servicio del ser humano, no al final que haya millones de personas al servicio de la tecnología. Eso es un retroceso importantísimo sobre el que también tenemos que vertebrar. Pero bueno, sobre todas estas cuestiones, de una forma mucho más amplia, agradecer de nuevo el que me hayáis invitado y luego si establecemos algún turno de palabra y de debate, será un auténtico placer compartirlo con todos vosotros. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, José, for your perspective. Claes-Mikael, European Trade Unions perspective.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much,
10
Lucie.
to 12 minutes, no more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
44 minutes. No, what is it?
44 minutes.
Almost.
I cut you. Don't
Yeah, you cut me. Good. No, I will stick. I've actually prepared an intervention here. So, Lucie, colleagues, friends, it's great to be here and to meet up with you. And let me be very clear from the outset, and I think this is a fact that's there for all of you, that Europe is making strategic choices right now, and that these choices will shape our role in the world. But the future of our entire model, in fact, is under discussion here. And as trade unions and workers, we cannot be neutral observers in this process, and I guess that's very good that you're having this debate because we need to discuss these issues. And it's a fact, it's a reality, of course, that geopolitical instability has returned. War is back in Europe, and global tensions are rising by the hour. And yes, this requires response. But what we are seeing, I think, is a rapid political shift towards defense spending without an equally clear commitment to protect the social foundations of our economies. And that is where the ETUC, and I would believe all of us, fundamentally disagree with the direction. And I would like to outline at least 4 principles or topics, issues, if you so want, that I believe is important for this discussion that we need to have. Firstly, on defense spending, yes, security matters, but let us not pretend that there are no trade-offs. There are. And unless we address them honestly, workers and common people will pay the price, because if increased defense budget lead to cuts in welfare and public services, pressure on wages, or a new wave of austerity, well, then it's not a security strategy. It is a redistribution of risk onto workers. And we reject that. In fact, it would be an insecurity agenda. And our position is clear, that there can be no security policy that weakens social security. In fact, if Europe can mobilize billions for defense, it can also mobilize resources to protect our welfare states, invest in public services, and strengthen social protection. That is a political choice, not an economic necessity. Secondly, we are entering a phase of massive public investment, also in defense-related industries. And let me be equally clear here. Public money cannot come without social conditions. And trade unions cannot must not accept public subsidies for companies that undermine collective bargaining, business models built on precarious work, or strategic industries that exclude workers from decision-making. If industries are strategic, as it's often called, well, then, of course, workers in those industries are strategic too. So the conditions must be explicit. Strong collective agreements, quality jobs, worker participation, and real investments in skills. Anything less is unacceptable. Thirdly, the current security debate is dangerously narrow because security is being reduced to military capacity. But a Europe with rising inequality, weaker welfare, and declining trust in institutions is not secure, no matter how much it spends on defense. And this is not an ideological issue, it's a structural issue. And social cohesion is a precondition for stability. If undermined, Europe itself is undermined. Fourthly, too often we see decisions being taken faster and too often also with less involvement of social partners, and that is a serious mistake because you cannot build resilience by excluding the very people and the very organizations who make the economy function. And trade unions must be part of shaping industrial policy, defense-related investment, and economic governance, but not as an afterthought, but as a core component. Now, let me conclude. The real issue is not whether Europe should act in a more unstable world. It must. The real issue is how we choose to do so. If Europe and its member states respond to geopolitical instability by shifting resources away from our social model, weakening workers' rights, and by concentrating decision-making power, well, then we are making ourselves more fragile, not more resilient. And we must oppose that direction. What we need is a Europe that is strong because of its social model, not despite of it. A Europe that understands that welfare states are not a cost, but infrastructure. Workers' rights are not an obstacle, but the foundation. And social investment is not a secondary, but a strategic issue. And that is the line that the ETUC will defend. And I also believe that it is an agenda worth defending in our European debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also to you, Claes-Mikael. I mean, from both of you, we have heard clearly security needs to be taken in a holistic way. We need to get to the culture of security and defense. At the same time, we cannot go back from the acquired rights and from the social Europe. Clear message from the trade unions on public investments, but not without social conditionalities, to extend the debate on security because it's not just defense spendings, no decisions without trade unions, and basically who pays, it shouldn't be just transfers, and that this is our political choice. Clear on the table from our first speakers, so now we've got really quite a comfortable time for first reactions, responses, questions. I can see Jack, I can see Philip, I can see Christina. Oh, guys, it won't work. It won't work. Jakob, Stefano. Let's try to leave some questions and reaction also for the other panels, because we would like to give the fair chance to everyone. Have you got it? Which sounds, I'm sorry to say it, 1 minute each, and I'm going to be cutting you, starting with Jack, Philip, Christina, Jovita, Jakob, Stefano, Susanne and which is your first name? We know it. 1 minute each. Jack, you start, and 1 minute.
Thanks, President, and I welcome the contribution from the speakers. Well, just since it's only 1 minute, and it might well be as appropriate to the next session as this one, the point that is not being made in the narrative that has unfolded over the last 2 years is that in order to have peace, we need a strategy for peace. And that has to be reflected in a narrative for peace. I'm not criticising the speakers because they're not guilty of it, but the narrative in Europe over the last 2 years is a narrative concentrated on the technicalities of war, and that can have a self-fulfilling momentum. We need in Europe to make it absolutely clear every time we speak that we will attack no one. No one need fear being attacked by us, and nobody can weaponise the possibility of being attacked by us to justify militarisation on their side.
Thank you, Jack. Sorry. Philip.
Thank you. I can't speak Maltese, right? So please use your headphones. Christine Lagarde, aktar kmini l-lum, wissiet fil-fat li minħabba l-prezzijiet dawk li sejħu second round effects, x'aktar se jkun hemm żieda fil-rat tal-mexxijiet minn April, titilbot jiġifieri minn issa. Se tkun il-pożizzjoni ta' trade unions għaliex di mhux l-ewwel darba li rajna żidiet fil-mexxijiet mingħajr ma jkun hemm rispons minn ta' trade unions biex itaffu l-effetti negattivi ta' żieda sostanzjali ovvjament fil-cost of living. Naturalment, diġà bdejna nħossu l-effetti minħabba l-fuel u l-enerġija, imma bla dubju dil-gwerra li għaddej minn issa se jkollha impatt ukoll fuq prodotti oħra, speċjalment fuq prodotti tal-ikel. Grazzi, Lucy.
Thank you very much. Christina, please, 1 minute.
Tak, jeg vil tale på dansk. Det var nogle rigtig spændende og vigtige indlæg, der kom, og jeg er meget enig i den holistiske sikkerhedspolitik. Og i det ligger der jo noget i forhold til uddannelse, der har jeg et konkret forslag, for ikke at tale for lang tid om det her. Det er, at der er et behov for, at vi mapper de europæiske lande i forhold til skoler og uddannelse, universiteter, hvor det er, at demokratiet er under pres, enten af regeringer eller andre, som gør, at lærerne ikke kan undervise i visse ting, eller at de bliver presset til at undervise i noget andet. Det er et stigende problem, som vi ser, men vi har ikke tilstrækkelig viden om det her. Og jeg kunne også godt tænke mig, og tak for dit indlæg, Claes-Mikael også, at ETUC også forholder sig til det her som en del af det sikkerhedspolitiske. Så er der den sociale sammenhængskraft i vores samfund, hvor det også handler om, at der...
Thank you, Christina. Sorry.
All right.
Sorry. Jovita, 1 minute.
Ačiū už suteiktą žodį, kalbėsiu lietuviškai. Iš tikrųjų noriu padėkoti Claes-Mikael už labai teisingus žodžius ir teisingą pasisakymą. Noriu pasakyti, kad Lietuvoje mes skiriame 4,38% nuo vidaus produkto ir skirsime 5%. Mes turime Vokietijos brigadą Lietuvoje, dėl ko jaučiamės žymiai saugiau. Ir taip pat neturime, noriu pasakyti, kad neturime visiškai diskusijų dėl šių pinigų skirimo profesinėse sąjungose. Tai taip pat labai reikalingas švietimas, būtent švietimas, kaip elgtis karo atveju, kaip reaguoti ir panašiai. Ačiū labai dar kartą už suteiktą žodį.
Thank you very much. Jakob, 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I'll speak in Slovenian. Jaz mislim, da prvo vprašanje, ki smo si ga na nek način, ko smo se pogovarjali, kako zasnovati pravzaprav tudi to razpravo, je bilo, ali potrebujemo več vlaganj v obrambo. Mislim, da je to vprašanje, ki je že v štartu nekako delilo in iz tega potem izvirajo tudi nadaljna vprašanja. Ne? In to je, vsak se lahko seveda strinja s tem, kar je bilo povedano strani govorcev, ampak kako izvesti vsa ta vlaganja v obrambo, v izobraževanje, v odpravo posledic energetske krize, v raziskovanja. Ne? In raziskava, ki smo jo sami naredili znotraj naše skupine, je pokazala, da pravzaprav izbire sta samo dve. Dvig davkov ali pa poseg v pravice. In tisto, kar bi si sam želel slišati v razpravah danes, je predvsem, kako pravzaprav zagotoviti to, da lahko ohranimo v bistvu in nivo pravic in hkrati zagotovimo svojo strateško avtonomijo v najširšem smislu. Hvala.
Thank you very much. Stefano, for 1 minute, please.
Sì, grazie. Signor Cepeda, lei ha detto che in Italia c'è stato un risultato del referendum particolarmente interessante. Gli italiani hanno detto no a una riforma della Carta Costituzionale che rappresenta i principi e i valori della nostra nazione. Io mi chiedo, in Europa, dove sono i nostri principi e i nostri valori? In che modo l'Unione difende l'articolo 2 e l'articolo 3 dell'Unione Europea, dove si dice che lo scopo è promuovere la pace, i suoi valori e il benessere dei cittadini? Dov'è che noi affermiamo i principi presenti nella Carta Europea dei diritti fondamentali? Dov'è che difendiamo il multilateralismo, il ruolo delle Nazioni Unite, quando la commissaria per il Mediterraneo va al Board of Peace? Dov'è e in che modo noi difendiamo la nostra dignità e sovranità quando accettiamo un accordo commerciale con gli Stati Uniti con la pistola alla tempia? Dov'è che noi affermiamo i nostri principi? Grazie.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Dimitros, please.
Θα μιλήσω ελληνικά, αλλά σε 1 λεπτό, παρότι μας είπατε, κυρία Πρόεδρε, ότι έχουμε άπλετο χρόνο, μας είπατε 1 λεπτό στο τέλος και δεν μπορούμε. Νομίζω δεν θα μπορούσε να διαφωνήσει κανείς με τους δύο εισηγητές, ιδιαίτερα με τον πρώτο. Άμα έχουμε συνδικαλιστές, ευρωβουλευτές, μια χαρά τα λένε. Ούτε βήμα πίσω από τα κοινωνικά δικαιώματα. Το ζήτημα θυμίζει αυτό τον ποντικό με τη γάτα. Ποιος τελικά θα κρεμάσει το κουδούνι στη γάτα. Πώς θα το κάνουμε πράξη αυτό σε μια περίοδο που ο πόλεμος επισκιάζει τα πάντα και το πρώτο που κάνουν οι κυβερνήσεις είναι να περιορίσουν αυτά τα δικαιώματα. Άρα τα συνδικάτα λοιπόν πρέπει να αποδείξουν ότι η προστασία των κοινωνικών δικαιωμάτων σήμερα στην Ευρώπη και στον κόσμο δεν είναι πολυτέλεια, αλλά είναι όρος επιβίωσης και ευθύνη. Αυτό δεν μπορεί να γίνει χωρίς να υπάρξουν αντίστοιχες κινητοποιήσεις, ενημέρωση του κόσμου, έτσι ώστε να επιβληθούν στις κυβερνήσεις, να μην υπάρξει περιορισμός ούτε στις συλλογικές διαπραγματεύσεις, ούτε βέβαια στα υπόλοιπα κοινωνικά δικαιώματα, ούτε στην εργασία, ούτε στις αμοιβές. Σε ό,τι αφορά δε στο ζήτημα, Πρόεδρε, που θέσατε για την πραγματική ανεξαρτησία της Ευρώπης, το θέμα είναι ότι η Ευρώπη μπορεί, το θέμα είναι όμως είναι πολιτική στρατηγικής. Θέλει να πετύχει πρώτα απ' όλα ενεργειακή αυτονομία. Δεύτερο, αμυντική αυτονομία. Βλέπουμε ότι σήμερα σέρνεται στην κυριολεξία πίσω από αυτά που κάνει ο Τραμπ. Ευχαριστώ.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that. Susanne, please.
Mich würde interessieren, ob der EGB schon ein empirisches Bild zu der Fragestellung hat, ob und wenn ja, wie Verteidigungsausgaben gegen soziale Rechte ausgespielt werden. Wir haben in Deutschland 2 Punkte gesehen bisher, nämlich einmal, dass die Verteidigungsausgaben von der Schuldenbremse, also von dem Kreditaufnahmeverbot, ausgenommen worden sind. Dennoch wird es natürlich indirekt Auswirkungen haben, auch in das normale Budget rein. Das Zweite ist, was wir gesehen haben in Deutschland, dass im Rahmen des Tariftreuegesetzes, was neu eingeführt worden ist, bezogen auf öffentliche Auftragsvergabe, der gesamte Verteidigungsbereich ausgenommen ist. Das heißt, wir haben schon zwei ganz konkrete Auswirkungen in diesen beiden Feldern. Das würde mich mal interessieren, ob der EGB einen Überblick hat, wie sich das in anderen Mitgliedstaaten bislang schon ausgewirkt hat. Danke.
Thank you very much. And Denis.
Thank you, Mrs. President. I will speak in French. Moi, je vous remercie d'abord pour la clarté des débats et de les exposer. D'un point de vue pragmatique, ma question serait comment est-ce qu'on va jouer collectif, notamment au niveau de l'industrie de défense. Les pays européens font à peu près tous la même chose. Alors, un exemple que j'aime bien, que j'ai déjà cité ici, les chasseurs, jusque dans les années 80-90, il y avait 2 avions de chasse en Europe. Les Suédois faisaient le Gripen et les Français faisaient le Mirage et le Rafale. Et puis les Anglais, les Allemands, les Italiens se sont mis à en faire un 3e, l'Eurofighter. 3 avions de chasse sur un continent, c'est absolument unique. Et la plupart des pays achètent américains, F-16 ou F-35. Donc, on ne peut pas s'en sortir comme ça aussi. Comment est-ce qu'on va faire pour qu'à un moment donné, eh bien, on joue collectif, qu'on arrête de multiplier les infrastructures et que finalement, on achète américain?
Thank you very much. So, Judith, as a very last speaker.
Yes, thank you for the floor. I switch to German. Ich bin sehr froh über die heutige Debatte und in meinen Augen ist sie auch längst überfällig. Es wurde sehr vieles gesagt, was ich nur sehr begrüßend unterstreichen kann. An dieser Stelle möchte ich aber sagen, dass ich Jacks Äußerung der Notwendigkeit eines Friedensstrategie absolut unterstützen möchte. Hier möchte ich entgegenhalten, dass über Krieg auf den sehr technischen Terminussen gesprochen wird, wie wenn es ein Schachbrett, ein Schachspiel wäre mit Hobbystrategen sozusagen am Wort. Aber wenn man sich nur 2 Minuten vergegenwärtigt, was Krieg tatsächlich bedeutet, kann für mich nur folgen, dass man eine Strategie des Friedens, eine Strategie für Frieden entwickelt und hier auch die diplomatische Ebene mit einbezieht. Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. So you did get quite an input, and I give you each 3 minutes. No more. Sorry for that. It just showed these debates need to be developed at different environments. For the moment, I'm sorry. 3 minutes. José, please start. 3 minutes.
Muchas gracias, Judith. Solo 3 minutos, ¿no? Como decía el compañero, dice, tanto y al final no nos queda tiempo, ¿no? Bueno, voy a intentar reducirlo todo a los 3 minutos. Claro que tenemos que desarrollar una estrategia para la paz. Me parece que es obvio. En el último minuto hemos visto donde, en fin, el presidente del Gobierno de España, Pedro Sánchez, le ha puesto cara y le ha hecho frente a las políticas de Donald Trump de arrasar Irán, bajo una excusa de que todavía, como nos pasó con la guerra de Irak, parecía que es que había bombas de destrucción masiva en Irán, en fin, y alguien, de repente, en la Casa Blanca, diría yo, mejor dicho, en el Pentágono, con los servicios de inteligencia norteamericanos, la CIA, les han dicho, oiga usted, que por muchas bombas que lancen a un régimen que está instalado sobre el terreno durante más de 50 años, no va a poder usted avanzar. Por lo tanto, o lo invade de forma terrestre Irán, o si no, me parece que usted está abocado al fracaso, ¿no? Todo sistema y toda puesta en marcha de un sistema bélico como el que Norteamérica está desarrollando, con Estados Unidos está desarrollando, de la mano también de Israel, tiene consecuencias. Tiene consecuencias claramente desde el punto de vista económico, ¿no? Tiene consecuencias energéticas. Alguien hablaba de nuestro trabajo también en la defensa de la autonomía de la energía. Claro que sí. Hemos visto cómo de repente toda la estrategia que había desarrollado la Unión Europea para intentar presionar al régimen de Putin frente a su incursión en Ucrania, ¿no? Con una serie de sanciones, medidas restrictivas. Hemos visto cómo nuestros sistemas energéticos europeos dependían en exceso, por ejemplo Alemania, ¿no? De una forma brutal del gas ruso. Y de repente La estrategia pasa ahora por parte del señor Donald Trump de levantar todo tipo de sanciones y permitir que el petróleo ruso se distribuya por el mundo, porque claro, como no tenían previsto lo que iba a pasar en Irán, el estrecho de Hormuz de repente empieza a cerrarse, algunos barcos no pueden pasar, se disparan los precios, el precio del petróleo, el precio en general. Como decía, al final, ¿quién lo pagan? Los de siempre, los trabajadores. Por lo tanto, hablar de una estrategia basada en la paz es una estrategia basada en garantizar a nuestra gente, a los trabajadores, seguridad, y la seguridad pasa por seguir defendiendo derechos. Cuando hablamos de seguridad de una forma mucho más amplia, como comentaba al principio, y por dar estabilidad. Todo lo que hoy genera grandes inestabilidades en el mundo, ya sea por una cuestión económica o militar, al final tiene una incidencia directa sobre los trabajadores, absolutamente directa. No hay mayor no hay mayor arma de destrucción masiva que las desigualdades, que la desigualdad. Tenemos que seguir levantando más que nunca posiblemente nuestros discursos desde la izquierda de la defensa de nuestros valores. Claro, decía algún compañero, ¿cuál es la defensa de los valores europeos? Desde luego, desde la izquierda europea yo creo que está bien claro, ¿no?, que es defender a los nuestros, seguir profundizando en derechos, seguir profundizando en libertades, seguir profundizando en esa esperanza que tantos les están intentando quitar, porque la desigualdad lo que genera es una gran desafección a los sistemas políticos. Y hay muchos trabajadores hoy que no creen en la política, que no creen en los sindicatos. Hay muchos trabajadores hoy que no creen en nadie que les pueda defender frente a la pobreza que están abocados diariamente. Es que no hay tantos trabajadores que puedan sobrevivir con 800 euros al mes. No es que no lleguen a fin de mes, es que no llegan a principio de mes. Y esos trabajadores pierden la esperanza por nuestro trabajo, el de todos ustedes que están trabajando también a nivel sindical y el de todos nosotros que estamos a nivel político en las instituciones, a nivel europeo y en nuestros países, en nuestros gobiernos. Claro, entonces, claro que tenemos que seguir trabajando en ese sentido. Y solamente un segundo. Bueno, ok, soy disciplinado. Gracias.
Thank you very much, José. I gave you a bit seconds more, and I know we all are very passionate about it, but as I said, we need to continue with that. Claes-Mikael.
Thank you. I will stick to my 3 minutes as good as I can. No, I think it was very interesting reactions that came up. I tried to put them in different boxes in a way to see if, I mean, what Susanna, what you mentioned, what happened in Germany. Obviously, I think that's similar things have happened in the Nordic countries, for example, but I'm not the right person to respond to that. I'm sure that there are colleagues here that can share their experiences, but I do think that it is a shifting economic landscape that is following as well, and in particular, well, the bridge here is not far to the Hormuz Strait and the inflation or cost shock that we're looking at now coming our way, and well, let's say that we're not well prepared for it, but I think it's going to be quite stormy, and I think it was the Dutch colleague that asked for the trade union response, and I think one of the things we will be very carefully looking for or be against, I guess, is increases of the rate, the money rate from the ECB. I think that's what we need to be worried about as we go forward, because that will really cool down our European economy. We had the debate on strategic autonomy, I would say, with the good example from the French colleague because there's a lot of overlaps happening in Europe. So yes, we need to spend more defense, but I think there is a lot of smarter ways of ensuring that there's not a lot of overlaps and so on. So I think that's another area where there is correctly a lot of things to do. Then I think we had two colleagues, the Jack from Ireland and also the Austrian colleague touched up something that I think is a little bit of the elephant in the room, something we also have had in the ETUC discussions, and that is the broad understanding or discussion on what peace means, a peace strategy means in this setting that we're in. Some people would say we're in a fist fight. Well, when you're in a fist fight, you're not necessarily put your hands down. And I don't think that's what the colleagues are saying, that are looking for peace at all. And then you have other people saying, no, we have to fight. And I think that's the discussion we need to have going all along here. What is feeding into a peaceful coexistence? Again, how do we get down? And I think we know from experience through history, as soon as we get weapons, we will tend to use them. And I think it's a much darker scenario ahead of us as well, and that is the fact that we have nuclear weapons in Europe, globally today, and that means that the situation could get very, 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 and I say it again, very dangerous. So let's continue that discussion. Thank you.
Definitely, we are gonna thank you both. I know it's a challenge. I'm happy that many colleagues wanted to intervene, you know, put in questions, make reflections, but definitely we stay in the loop because this is not the end of the story for us, and I'm sure for you in the Parliament and in the S&D neither, and the ETUC, that's clear for us because that's my family. So thank you both. If you can, stay with us still because the other panel is going to be interesting as well, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now ask the second panelists, which is Isabelle Barthès and Marco Tarquinio. So he's not here yet? No. Okay, but he's coming.
We have voted in this moment.
Yes, I know that you are voting in this moment.
Yes.
So thanks a lot. Good luck. Bye-bye. Moving. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. To the geopolitical instability and the impact on workers' rights. I am getting there. So having Isabelle Barthès, the Deputy Secretary of IndustriAll Europe, so I would say almost my mother organization, still in the good old times. Welcome. We are having the S&D MEP who's coming slightly later. And we are having on remote, we are having Professor Rolph van der Hoeven, professor at the IAS from Hague. But basically, I would like to structure slightly the focus of your contributions. So, Isabelle, for you, it would be a suggested angle to leverage the political shifts to reshape Europe's industrial strategy with priority for workers and sustainability. So the supply chain, workers' rights in the context of deglobalization. Would be nice if we could get into 4 to 5 minutes. I know it's a huge challenge, but you have seen that the debate on this is something which is also an important part for it. So without any further, the floor is yours and welcome.
Thank you, Lucie. Good afternoon, colleagues. Very happy to be here for this extremely important discussion. I listened to the first part, and I think, it's a question of peace, it's a question of security, and we know that, well, you've said it very clearly, security is much more than defense spending. So, I'd like to take the perspective of industrial workers, the US-Israeli attack on the 28th of February marks a dramatic escalation in global instability, and this is adding to unprecedented challenges already faced by industrial workers in their industry. So it's about high energy cost, it's about fragile supply chain, it's about unfair global competition, and also it's been mentioned the massive investment that are needed. And with the current, as the conflict is actually going on, it's clear that there is a major risk of economic fallout from the blockade of that Strait of Hormuz, but also with all the ramification. And let's be clear, it's already there. Of course, there is the impact on the oil prices, the fossil fuels prices, but our members are already reporting about component shortages, also about short-time work schemes being activated. Also, we hear about scarcity of fertilizers also impacting food prices. And last week, the ECB was already issuing a forecast about inflation setting to rise and potentially offsetting, also having an impact on purchasing power. So we've been there. We know that, we've been there almost twice, let's say, in a very short period of time. And we also know from our industry that the full scales of what is coming is really hidden behind the very complex supply chain. So urgent action is needed. In the short run, we need to deal with energy. We need to coordinate our approach in terms of diversification, control of demand, joint purchases, but also we see already the high historical profit margin that some actors are already making. So we have to step in immediately. Impose windfall profit and ensure that windfall profit are taxed, but also prevent that price gouging take place. But also we have to protect workers because we know how already we hear about short-time work, so we have to make sure that mechanism which we already put in place, the short-type program, are also quickly activating. And governments, especially in Europe, we have already developed these tools. So it's high time to activate this crisis mechanism. And at the same time, as you mentioned, we also have to redouble effort to de-escalate the conflict because it's also about diplomatic efforts. But in the long run as well, we should draw the lesson of this situation. It's absolutely essential to enhance energy efficiency measures and also to accelerate the transition to decarbonized energy. It's about energy, but also more broadly, this situation highlights a trend of deepening of geopolitical fragmentation. And we know that actions of the scale of what we are going through now will create a long-term ripple effect across global supply chain, but also diplomatic relations and international markets. So Europe needs to be resilient. We cannot afford to continue to be so dependent on external sources for critical and strategic technologies and materials, be it semiconductors, batteries, critical raw material, but also you've mentioned defense and security related manufacturing capabilities, but also still clean technology. But in order to have strategic autonomy, we also have a robust industrial policy. We need a robust industrial basis, and we need a proactive industrial policy. So what we need is long-term common investment plan for technology, but also for people, resilient industrial ecosystem underpinned by social conditionalities and delivering on quality job, because we also need stability. We need also social stability. The last week or 2 weeks ago, we welcomed the Industrial Accelerator Act, which is aimed at boosting demand for European-made clean technologies. But these measures must also ensure investment, whether they are domestic or foreign, and they need to create quality jobs, drive technology and bring real value to Europe. But of course, made in Europe is not a silver bullet. We also need the fiscal power. We need actually the fiscal room for maneuver, not only for defense spending, but also to strengthen our industrial value chain and support strategic investment. And Europe has shown with Next Generation EU that common financing works. So in time of extreme geopolitical turbulence, Europe must build internal resilience and social stability, and we have the possibility to do it, but we now have to act together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabelle, for a very clear and detailed view from the perspective also of our colleagues in the sector, and the clear impacts not just on the costs of living, but also on basically the work and lack of work due to the conflict. So this all to be bear in mind. As our friend Marco still didn't manage to run from the parliament here, we would go to Professor van der Hoeven, who is on remote. I guess we can make it. So welcome. Where I would like to ask you, if possible, to focus your intervention on the new economic reality, resource constraint and possibilities for social cohesion and social investment in the current climate, employment and deglobalization. So welcome, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I can't be with you, but I think this is a very important meeting and I like to contribute. I'm going to share the screen with me because I want to share some slides with you. If the technical people could.
Yes, you have the button with the arrow and the square at the bottom.
Okay. Sorry, I'm.
Yes. Perfect. We can
can you see me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my basic thesis is on, I want to discuss what is happening now in terms of movements which have been taking place the last of 5-6 years. And I won't go back a couple of years that the global COVID pandemic has plunged the world in a socio-economic financial crisis. And here we see already that the rebound was unequal for poorer countries and low income. Now currently we see the recent AI revolution is also only strengthening these trends. And also that the current international financial system is inept to respond. For the social side is that all what has been achieved in the banner of the social development goals is currently under threat. And these problems are now exacerbated by the stark changes in the geopolitical situation. And that warrants increased vigilance and necessitates higher defense spending, especially in Europe. Now, the main point of my discussion today, a couple of minutes is left to me, is that I argue that although we're going to spend more money on defense, it does not change the earlier observations that were made after the COVID and after IE. So what I'm trying to do is now to share with you what the outcomes were of those two processes, and that in reaction to the current instability, increased expenditure should not be treated differently than we have been treating the other two challenges. And the reason for that is that if you look at historical patterns of technical change and growing in the past, we also have seen bubbles and golden age. And especially what is relevant for where we are now is a parallel with the 30s and the end of Second World War. The response to those two major movements which led to inequality were stopped by government policies providing directions, by governments interfering to stem the trend of inequality. What we have seen now and what we are continue to see is that if you see at the world level, only a small group of population won from the economic trends, but there's a big squeeze bottom, and you can see that there's 90% in the US and Western Europe who hardly profited from progress the last 10 years. I have many of these examples. I will not discuss them all. Here you see that the top 2,000 transnational corporations profited and that the global income, labor income shares declined. Also, and that is very important, is that the growing inequality has not led to higher investments, which is of course a contradiction, because if you don't have higher investments, you don't create income. So these trends also need to be disturbed. Also, from working with the ILO, in which I was involved for a long time, we also noticed still that the labor productivity index is increased, but the wage index not. So wages are running behind productivity in most developing countries. And that the share of corporate taxes in total taxes is also declining. And that has led to a falling top income taxes rate. In the countries of the OECD, top income rates fell from 66% in 1981 to 45% around 2020. And now, what we have observed is that despite this growing inequality, from which especially workers are suffering, has not generated sufficient social forces to achieve greater income and equality as was done in other important periods in the 30s and after the Second World War. And now the recent increase of defense budget in the EU makes it even more urgent to generate sufficient social forces to counteract this inequality augmenting threat. And I think for me, at least that's what I'm working on, I think this is one of the major challenges for which we are and for which especially countries in Europe are now. Now, if you demand what can we do? Atsulomo, the Nobel Prize winner, has discussed four possible scenarios. A sideline is, these slides were prepared a couple of days ago for the Secretariat. I don't know whom of you have read the Financial Times yesterday, but in the Financial Times, Larry Fink, who you probably all know is one of the biggest investor companies in the world, has in his letter to shareholders, mind you, written that widening inequality in the hands who financed it is unwarranted, and that this cannot go on if one wants to have a stable finance climate. So you can see that already there is support from major investors that inequality is too high. Now, what are the four scenarios which we can look at given the situation of inequality, of more resources also going to defense? There is no serious reform to falling institutions or address economic social inequality. I think at the moment we see that. This path can continue if leaders do not understand the severity of the problem. And I think your seminar at the moment is very, very relevant, so that we can really try to organize a counter movement against the growing inequality, which will be also more growing because of defense expenditure and the expenditure. You've seen that the shares of the major companies are bursting out of their seams. So business as usual, I think we cannot have. Then there is something which I would call China Light, that is that people are willing to forego their democratic rights and their inputs in order that there would be some growth. And we have seen that as a model which is emulated in China. But I think what social economics like us are saying is that option can gradually passing, and I'm afraid that there's more sympathy for this now than a couple of years ago. But it can lead to diminished people control, and it will lead in the end to more social upheaval. Then we have also the threat of digital serfdom, as we call it. That is where the big, and that is where IE come into artificial intelligence, which are proposing their own solutions. And you have all reading the papers the last 2 years. They want to have some social aspects, universal basic income, some charter schools, some more e-government. But all these solutions, which they so magnificently try to propose, paint over the underlying problems, and they likely to lead even to more and wider discontent and frustration in the future. And I think we have seen that in outcome of elections and also at the moment that's currently happening in the United States. So a final option, and this is what I call with some people a welfare state through. We had the first iteration of the welfare state after the Great Depression, where the movement of people and social movement make great change. And then we had a second welfare state, which was because of the region and Thatcher, to downgrade a weakened iteration of welfare states. And now there is agreement that both better and more accountable institutions are necessary, and especially a more equitable way of sharing the gains from technological process and globalization. And both voices from the left and the right are arguing at the moment that the game is rigged to the benefit of small and powerful cohort of people. And that is, I think, where we have to come in to make sure that we will have a welfare state 3, which is redoing with the anti-worker redistribution that we have now seen at the moment. Everyone agrees that governments need to shoulder more responsibility as of becoming more investment. So we need to create a political moment, and I think the time is more than ripe to do that, especially also with the increased spending on defense, to really work on a reconfiguration of the welfare state. And if we can look at the post-World consensus, then a social contract was a possible model. And I think that was also the outcome of the high-level meeting on structural change and globalization of the ILO about 10, 15 years ago, that we need to work through a global social contract. And I think your deliberations can be very useful to that. In case of time, I skipped the last slide where I give some more detailed recommendations, and then also an adaptation of inclusive job-rich recovery, which the ILO has been propagating for the last couple of years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor van der Hoeven. I mean, that's something we all know, and I love your kind of simplified but still academic approach to the things that are so close to us. Basically, the increasing inequalities, the inappropriate distribution, lowering income share, and so on and so on. So it's, I mean, in this debate, which is not very optimistic, at least I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. We definitely get to some of your points in the debate. We should get our speaker from the parliament coming in 1 minute. I just wonder if he is or not. But for the moment, if there are already some requests for the floor, let's at least make the list and we can start with the debate. I can see Florian for the moment. Hands up. You did? Rudy. I can see, yeah. Della Stavroa, if I'm not mistaken. Della Stavroa. Ah, I know. So I've got for the moment 4 people. I've got Florian, I've got Judith, I've got Rudy, I've got Lila. Anyone else for the moment?
Pascal.
That's the destiny sitting at this table. Okay, try to start with your contributions, not to be too long. Let's try to really stay reasonable because we still got 1 speaker and I'm sure we still get to a debate. Florian, floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Lucie. Thank you, dear Chair. Well, I think that, first of all, thank you for this debate because we are seeing, at least in Romania, important changes in the labor market. What I wanted to ask is the following, because you have mentioned crisis mechanism, and in order to combat this, the states and the EU should be part of, should propose something in which the pressure on workers should be lower. But how we can do it in a context in which the deficit, or in the member state in which the deficit is already high? And I can give you a concrete example. Romania has 6.7 public deficit right now. And the question is the following. Is the 3% rule fit for purpose in this time, especially when we are asking for long-term investment, how we can develop an industry or a country in a context in which we are imposing 3% deficit? From my point of view, it is utopical to do it. In the normal times, in this time, I think that we need at least 5%. What do you think about this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really pretty concrete. You did.
Thank you. I again switch to German. Meine Frage wäre bezüglich der Trade-offs, wenn jetzt die europäische Industriepolitik vor allem auf Verteidigung ausgerichtet wird oder das ein sehr starker Faktor ist, kann es nicht sein, dass wir auch quasi eine zukunftsorientierte Industriepolitik, die investiert in Forschung und Entwicklung, für einen fairen sozialen, grün ökologischen Übergang, dass wir hier möglicherweise sogar einen Anschluss an eine nachhaltige Wettbewerbsfähigkeit verpassen, auch was etwa Qualifikationen betrifft. Also wohin werden die Weichen in der Industriepolitik gestellt und sind wir möglicherweise hier in einer nicht guten, falschen Richtung unterwegs. Und die zweite Anmerkung ist, soweit ich es überblicke, ist der Multiplikatoreffekt von Verteidigungsinvestitionen ja auch überschaubar. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Leila, please go ahead.
When there is geopolitical stability, there is tension that reinforces nationalist and racist policies, which can limit equal employment opportunities and affect workers' rights. Another point I want to say is that the energy shock, what we live now, if it continues too long, sure, it can lead to production disruptions. So the bad thing is that we have changes in working conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rudy?
Thank you. We can speak Dutch, I've understood. Ik ga dus in op uw vraag om onze eigen taal te gebruiken. Wel wat de mogelijkheden die er zijn, maar ik was gisteren in de studiegroep economische zekerheid, economic security. Wat ik daar voel is dat dit debat of deze crisissituatie weer wordt aangegrepen op een nieuwe aanval te organiseren vanuit werkgeverszijde, vanuit groep 1. Want dat is het eerste dat ik hoor. Weer loonmatigen, weer de indexering beperken, weer de inflatie beperken via het afbreken van de lonen. En er is al zoveel ongelijkheid. Dus ik denk dat wij onze taal duidelijk moeten maken. Economische zekerheid betekent economische stabiliteit, sociale stabiliteit, zoals de professor heeft gezegd. En dat we met dat verhaal moeten komen en dat we niet gaan aanvaarden van de ongelijkheid nog groter te maken. Want het is geen antwoord op de crisis, het is geen antwoord op de geopolitieke toestand. En het ergste van al vind ik dat Europa en Van der Leyen, dat zij coalities maakt met extreem rechts, met populistisch rechts, dat men eigenlijk opnieuw naar fossiele brandstoffen aan het gaan was, dat men de groene plannen en de sociale transitie achter zich heeft gelaten. En dat is juist het antwoord op de crisis. De goedkoopste kilowattuur is die je niet verbruikt, die je uitspaart. Dat soort dingen moeten weer... we moeten zelf op elektriciteit meer werken en op de hernieuwbare elektriciteit. Spanje is op dat vlak het voorbeeld. Maar we gaan dus een strijd moeten leveren, ook binnen dit Sociaal-Economisch Comité. Zo kort wil ik het houden. Dank u.
Thank you very much. Pascal?
Oui, merci Lucie, je vais parler français. Donc, moi je pense que cette journée était attendue. Je pense qu'en effet, comme tu l'as dit, on a besoin d'avoir un débat ouvert. Moi je vais essayer d'aller à l'essentiel le plus vite possible. Je pense déjà qu'on a une difficulté, c'est de nommer le moment. C'est ce qu'on a nommé instabilité géopolitique. Moi je ne sais pas de ce que je lis, de ce que j'observe. Tu faisais référence au fait qu'on était nombreux à ne pas avoir connu de guerre, mais on a encore eu des parents ou des grands-parents qui ont connu la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Et quand je fais le lien avec ce qu'on peut lire dans des livres d'histoire, je pense que la multiplication des conflits armés, des scènes et des belligérants à différents endroits de la planète, peut-être que nous sommes déjà dans une sorte de troisième guerre mondiale, mais on n'ose pas se le dire. Je pense aussi que il y a, et ça a été cité dans les 4 scénarios, d'ailleurs je trouve que c'est peut-être ça aussi pas suffisamment dit. Je crois que la question du droit, la question des États comme on les a constitués, les relations internationales sont en train d'exploser. Et qu'il y a des acteurs qui ne sont pas suffisamment considérés dans notre réflexion, ce sont des multinationales, notamment celles de la tech. Et je pense que là, il y a des dangers pour la démocratie qui sont à l'œuvre. Je profite aussi de ce moment, quand je les cite, pour dire que ce n'est pas éloigné de ce qu'on s'est dit ce matin. On a beaucoup parlé des conflits, enfin de la montée de l'extrême droite. Les belligérants aujourd'hui sont quasiment tous gouvernés par des régimes d'extrême droite. L'extrême droite, c'est la guerre, on est en train de le voir. Donc je pense que je rejoins ce qui a été dit auparavant, je l'avais noté, je vais à l'essentiel. Je pense qu'il y a des choix politiques aujourd'hui, on défend les travailleurs. La question n'est pas de dire on est pour la paix, c'est tellement évident. Mais comment fait-on ? Donc évidemment que je pense qu'il faut des politiques d'investissement, je pense qu'il faut... J'ose le dire, il faut sortir des traités, ce n'est pas possible aujourd'hui. Il faut des choix politiques. Le budget, c'est un choix politique. Il faut un nouveau, j'ai apprécié cette expression de l'universitaire, il faut un nouveau contrat social qui va mettre l'investissement là où il faut, dans l'industrie européenne, OK dans l'armement, mais aussi pour assurer l'après, et j'espère que l'après va vite venir, après cette séquence mondiale assez redoutable. Donc je crois qu'il faut consolider l'Union européenne, et il faut l'asseoir sur un nouveau contrat social, sur les droits des travailleurs, sur les droits de la population, défendre ce qui est à l'origine de l'Union européenne, c'est-à-dire nos valeurs. On a un modèle à défendre aujourd'hui au niveau de l'Union européenne, ça explose de partout sur le continent. Nous restons peut-être un des derniers endroits, avec nos difficultés, nos imperfections, où il y a un système démocratique, il faut le défendre bec et ongle, y compris bien sûr par le dialogue social. Et enfin, parce que je pense que ça va être un des enjeux majeurs, on parle beaucoup de désinformation, etc., etc. Je pense qu'on doit mettre le paquet sur la science. On doit défendre coûte que coûte la science et le recours au fait qu'à un moment donné, des choses sont, je dirais, objectives et prouvées, parce que c'est là aussi qu'aujourd'hui, on est en difficulté face à de nombreuses personnes, des partis politiques, des mouvements qui veulent tout déconstruire, et y compris ce on cite beaucoup Orwell en ce moment, donc 1984. Enfin, voilà, je pense que c'est un enjeu majeur. Merci, Lucie. J'ai été trop long.
Just a little bit. Cinzia, please go ahead.
Grazie Lucie. Avrei voluto fare l'intervento quando arrivava il parlamentare italiano, ma insomma lui sa quello che penso. Dunque, noi ci troviamo anche in un dilemma. Ora, in questa sala non tutti condividono, anche tra noi colleghi sindacalisti, non tutti condividono la necessità di una spesa militare per la difesa. Io non mi sento minacciata da nessuno e come Europa vorrei sapere noi che cosa abbiamo a che fare con gli attacchi alla popolazione civile palestinese in Libano, in Iran. Io non capisco e non potrò mai essere dalla parte di chi molto sfrontatamente attacca in questo modo. L'Europa ha perso il suo ruolo diplomatico, noi avevamo rapporti storici consolidati di amicizia con tutti i paesi arabi della sponda sud e oggi siamo quasi intrappolati in relazioni diplomatiche molto, molto complicate, molto difficili, che non sappiamo poi anche tutta questa tensione, tutte queste guerre, che cosa porteranno nelle generazioni così giovani che sono state coinvolte. Sentivo, ma come tutti noi abbiamo sentito, insomma, in questi giorni, in questi mesi, quanto della popolazione giovane, giovanissima, di bambini, che saranno adulti fra qualche anno, che cosa saranno questi ragazzi senza scuola, senza istruzione, soltanto con molto odio dentro. Io non ho niente a che spartire con tutto questo, io mi sento europea che non ha niente a che spartire con tutto questo. E quindi quando si dice costruire una strategia per la pace vorrei sapere quali sono i nostri alleati. Se io mi devo alleare con la Cina non me ne importa niente, l'importante è che ci sia la pace. Per me è prioritario rispetto a qualunque cosa. C'è poi un problema, appunto, violazione del diritto internazionale, la mortificazione del ruolo delle Nazioni Unite. Noi siamo asserviti a noi europei, dico, non noi come sindacato, noi europei, Unione Europea. Io guardo a questa Unione Europea con tanta rabbia, asserviti alla politica degli Stati Uniti. Sembra quasi che non riusciamo ad avere una nostra politica internazionale, una nostra politica economica. Io penso che l'Europa conti soltanto se diventa economicamente forte ed economicamente indispensabile su qualche cosa. Se noi investiamo nella difesa e quindi nella produzione di tecnologia militare, apparecchiature militari, non saremo mai i primi della classe, perché ci sono altri che sono più forti di noi. Noi non saremo mai indispensabili. E quindi dipenderemo sempre da altri. Il nostro futuro economico vuole essere l'economia della difesa? Io non mi sento di lasciare a me stessa, ma anche ai nostri figli, un futuro che è legato alle tensioni, alle guerre, ai conflitti, perché se le armi si producono poi devono essere utilizzate, poi si vendono anche a chi ne fa un uso improprio. Mi sento di fare questo ragionamento qui anche perché noi stiamo assistendo a una riconversione industriale, questo chiedo a Isabelle, cioè una riconversione industriale di pezzi importanti di alcuni settori dell'economia verso la produzione militare. E questo genera tra i lavoratori molto sconcerto, perché da un lato c'è la necessità di avere un posto di lavoro, parliamoci chiaro, dall'altro lato però il posto di lavoro è legato a produrre morte anziché vita, lo dico proprio brutalmente. E questo crea, ho sentito questa mattina al telegiornale la riconversione di un'azienda della Volkswagen in Germania per una riconversione militare. Allora, i lavoratori che ti dicono, Isabelle? Perché noi abbiamo un'azienda italiana in Sardegna che è stata riconvertita per produrre armi E c'è un problema enorme anche nel contesto sociale, questa piccola realtà, insomma la Sardegna poi non è che ha altre alternative, cioè, si producono le armi, ci sta quello, c'è molto poco. Quindi questo crea anche nei contesti sociali molta rabbia, diffidenza, perché il futuro è legato a questo, il futuro è legato a capire quanti droni riusciamo a vendere, quanta tecnologia militare riusciamo a vendere, a chi la vendiamo, poi deve essere sempre rinnovata, innovata, perché la tecnologia cambia e quindi poi la vendiamo al Sud-Sudan, la vendiamo a chi fa le guerre civili, perché poi allora ci vogliamo mettere in questa spirale perché abbiamo paura di essere invasi, ma da chi? Ma da chi? L'Europa sarà forte solo se diventa forte economicamente, allora investiamo in qualcosa dove noi possiamo essere unici. Lo spazio, le telecomunicazioni, l'intelligenza artificiale, noi dobbiamo crescere dove siamo unici, perché tanto, per quante armi e per quanta difesa potremmo fare, noi non saremo mai i primi della classe. Allora, io mi sento di dirlo molto apertamente, perché questo è un dibattito molto difficile in tutti i nostri paesi, e perché comporta tagli su alcune spese, come abbiamo detto, di carattere sociale, e comporta anche modificare il nostro modello di sviluppo industriale, e questo mi preoccupa, perché vuol dire che non ci diamo altre priorità e altre chance sulla politica industriale.
Thank you, Cinzia. You managed to get extraordinary time, so I'm happy for you. No other comment. You don't need to be sorry. For the moment, we did have some space for it, so just be happy. No one else. I can still see Maria. Look, we would like to give the two speakers time to respond. We still hope to get the member of the parliament for the address. So I've got Maria, and there was some... And Susanna. Okay, so ladies, try to be briefer than Cinzia, definitely. Try to be brief. I was actually hoping to have someone from Eastern Europe, closer to borders with Russia. With the emotions we are having, up to you guys. I can throw a few sentences then. So Maria, Susanna. We already did have you. Of course, we can have you for a moment, but try really to be brief. Maria, go ahead.
In Spanish. Sí, muchísimas gracias. Os quiero compartir mi eslogan favorito de las últimas manifestaciones contra la guerra. Que hacer la guerra para defender la paz es como tener sexo para defender la virginidad. Es en sí una incongruencia. De todas maneras, ya sabemos cómo está la situación. Entiendo que hay diferentes sensibilidades según los vecinos que tienes. El tema es cómo hacer esta planificación de manera eficiente. Estamos hablando todavía de 27 sistemas de defensa y de 27 países que cada uno tiene su propio presupuesto y sus propios armamentos que ya sabemos que de por sí no funcionarán si de verdad nos vamos a la guerra. Entonces, ¿cuándo vamos a abrir el debate de que en vez de invertir cada país por su cuenta en armamentos, de hacerlo de una manera más coordinada, más eficiente y más a nivel europeo? Para mí esta sería la lógica, y también sospecho que los Estados miembros no van a querer dejar esta potestad a la Unión Europea por el simple hecho de que la industria armamentística y las comisiones y las mordidas que algunos sacan de prepararse para la guerra es mucho dinero. Y eso será uno de los obstáculos para empezar a hablar de una política de defensa o de armamento a nivel europeo. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Maria. Susanne, shortly.
Jetzt kann ich es ja kürzer machen. Nein, ich würde gerne anknüpfen an Cynthia, weil ich glaube, Cynthia hat den Finger in die Wunde gelegt. Und zwar nämlich an der Stelle, als wir ja nicht umhin können, zumindest in Deutschland haben wir die Debatte dass die verlorenen Arbeitsplätze in der Automobilindustrie nun ja ersetzt werden könnten durch Arbeitsplätze in der Rüstungsindustrie. Und ich würde wahrscheinlich sagen, dass Isabelle davon ein Lied singen kann, wie widersprüchlich teilweise und wie groß der Spannungsbogen, sage ich mal dezent, auch innerhalb der Gewerkschaften zu dem Thema ist. Und ich finde, wir können daran nicht dran vorbeireden, dass das so ist, weil das natürlich selbstverständlich auch mit der anderen Debatte was zu tun hat, nämlich mit der Debatte, wer wählt eigentlich rechts? Und dummerweise stehen wir vor dem Befund, dass, oder zumindest ist das eine der Thesen, dass viele der Arbeiter, die rechts wählen, also ich betone Arbeiter, weil das sieht bei Frauen anders aus, aber dass das genau eine Reaktion ist auf, ich sage mal, eine Verunsicherung zumindest auf den Arbeitsmärkten, die bisher als industriell sicher galten. Das heißt, wir haben hier mit einer ganzen Menge von widersprüchlichen, auch in den eigenen Reihen widersprüchlichen Tendenzen zu tun, über die wir, finde ich, nicht wegreden können, indem wir sozusagen die reine Lehre an die Wand malen, so gerne ich das hätte. Aber deswegen würde mich auch tatsächlich von Isabelle mal interessieren, auf europäischer Ebene, wie werden denn da im Rahmen von IndustriAll, ihr habt ja genau die einschlägigen Unternehmen bei euch, oder Gewerkschaften auch bei euch versammelt, wie da im Moment die Debatten ablaufen, weil ich glaube, die nicht zu führen, schadet uns mehr und drüber wegzureden, schadet uns mehr, als uns, ich sage mal, wirklich komplizierte Debatten selber anzutun.
Thank you very much. If you won't mind, Florian, there is still some space after the last panel for the debate. Same with Christian, if you allow, not to intervene now, but after the next panel. I mean, I was just going to say there are parts of Europe, Cinzia, and that's a very valid argument you are putting on the table, and that's why we still need to be developing on this debate. But there are parts of Europe where we are just fear each and every day that we are going to get Russian bombs, Russian drones, and Russians into our countries. We've got still some of us the experience of their occupation, and they are not rational, and we know it. And the Ukrainians could tell us. So it's basically rather about finding a good balance. And I mean, all for the coordination, you know, all for really smart approach to the defense of Europe in the military point of view. But not going to be developing on that. Happy to have the chance, Marco, that you made it. At some point, you missed first part of this panel, which was really interesting. You missed basically the whole debate part, but not the answers. So I would be happy if, and again, welcome amongst of us, if you could, for 10 minutes max, develop on the peace building amongst rising global tensions, shifting alliances and military threats, what is the role for the EU in this context, and how pacifism and disarmament could be articulated in the current climate linked to cases such as Ukraine. 10 minutes, no more, I'm sorry.
Grazie, parlo in italiano. Grazie cara Presidente. Grazie per la domanda, che è un po' il senso della mia presenza anche al Parlamento europeo. Io oggi siedo al Parlamento europeo e sono nel gruppo dei socialisti e democratici. Dopo 44 anni di giornalismo nel mio paese, alla fine ero direttore di un quotidiano, spesi per cercare di continuare a legittimare le parole e soprattutto le azioni, soprattutto quelle non viste, che costruiscono la pace, in un tempo nel quale siamo tornati a dire, con i leader globali, purtroppo non soltanto oltre l'Atlantico, oltre quella linea sanguinosa di battaglia che è diventata l'Europa orientale, le pianure ucraine nell'Europa orientale, quindi a Mosca, a Washington, non sono solo lì a dire che la pace si costruisce attraverso la guerra. L'abbiamo sentito dire anche da portavoci importanti della nostra Europa comunitaria, come piace chiamarla a me, che sono un federalista che pensa all'Europa come una federazione necessaria e possibile, ma come comunità soprattutto. C'è una sensibilità non residuale e non rassegnata in Europa che pensa che la pace si prepari attraverso politiche di pace e che contemplano anche delle politiche di difesa. Voglio affrontarlo subito questo tema che per me è particolarmente decisivo, spinoso e arduo. Il dramma della fase che stiamo vivendo è che abbiamo trasformato la difesa in un sinonimo di spesa militare, mentre la difesa, e noi europei l'abbiamo dimostrato al mondo, è qualcosa di più complesso, di più articolato, che ha dimensioni eminentemente politiche. La stessa costruzione dell'Europa europea è una grande azione di difesa disarmante che ha disarmato popoli che si erano fatti la guerra per secoli, capovolgendo le ragioni del conflitto. Quello che abbiamo fatto dopo la Seconda Guerra Mondiale, di cui ci gloriamo sempre, che abbiamo fatto l'impossibile. Non c'era motivo per cui i popoli che si erano scannati fino al giorno prima avviassero un percorso lento. Ci sono voluti un po' di anni perché prendesse forma la cosa e molte contraddizioni, ma un percorso che non aveva senso. Altiero Spinelli, quando pensò agli Stati Uniti d'Europa, stava in un'isola al confine, sbattuto lì dai fascisti, e in Europa dilagavano i carri armati di Hitler, quindi non c'era motivo per sognare quello che non c'era. Questo è il compito della politica, è il compito delle forze di lavoro. Sono nel gruppo dei socialisti e democratici, non dimentico che all'inizio del Novecento i socialisti in tutta Europa dicevano non un soldo, non un uomo, non un'ora di lavoro per la guerra, tutto per la pace. Ed era un messaggio che accomunava uomini e donne anche di diversa formazione, credenti e non credenti, in diverse parti di questo continente, resistenti. Oggi è possibile pensare una difesa che non sia solo sinonimo di spesa militare? Noi stiamo dibattendo, voteremo in questa sessione al Parlamento europeo, scusatemi per il ritardo, ma ero impegnato in voti non banali, fra l'altro, anche per le cose di cui stiamo dicendo, sul Global Gateway. Io dico che il Global Gateway, come tutta la cooperazione internazionale che mette in comunicazione il lavoro delle nostre società e il lavoro di altri pezzi di mondo, è parte della difesa comune che dobbiamo costruire. Perché senza una cooperazione in questo senso e basandoci soltanto sulla cooperazione militare, la globalizzazione degli armamenti, non costruiamo più pace. Guardate i dati del commercio delle armi dal 2015 in qua, non vi dico di andare più indietro. Ma dal 2015 in qua è un'impennata continua che fa pandan con i dati che l'Università di Uppsala, l'università svedese con il suo database sui conflitti in corso, rende evidente: aumenta il commercio delle armi, aumenta il numero dei conflitti armati nel mondo, a diverso livello di intensità. Hanno superato i 180, anche se noi ne vediamo molti meno di quelli che accadono realmente. Non siamo più neanche in grado di riconoscerne i connotati delle guerre che massacrano l'umanità. L'Europa ha un ruolo diverso a livello globale, deve ritrovarlo, se non si rassegna, dico io, al copione scritto da altri. Il copione scritto da altri è scritto da Putin, è scritto da Trump. Lo stiamo vedendo in queste ore in maniera drammatica. Dicevo, vengo dalla plenaria del Parlamento europeo, non riusciamo neanche a dibattere e dibatteremo soltanto sulle esecuzioni capitali in Iran. Dico soltanto io che faccio parte della Commissione dei diritti umani, una questione capitale, davvero, oltre che di pena capitale, quella delle esecuzioni dei condannati a morte in Iran. Ma in questo momento ci sono bombardamenti in Iran e nei paesi circonvicini per una guerra scatenata esattamente come Putin ha scatenato la sua contro l'Ucraina. E i doppi standard non sono ammissibili e non trovare le parole è un problema per l'Europa. E non trovare le azioni è un problema per l'Europa. Noi siamo l'unico luogo nel quale il multilateralismo è diventato non solo un modo di cercare l'equilibrio, ma una forma di governance. È il laboratorio del multilateralismo applicato, che ha funzionato. Funziona e oggi è sotto attacco, fuori e dentro l'Europa. Abbiamo una responsabilità, noi europei, di difenderlo con i fatti. Non riusciamo ancora, posso lamentarmi? Io che sono un federalista convinto del fatto che non riusciamo a difendere neanche le istituzioni multilaterali che hanno il suo ruolo nel nostro continente, penso alla Corte Penale Internazionale, tanto per fare un nome chiaro, di quelli che cercano di contrastare l'azione dei prepotenti sulla scena globale con la forza del diritto. Non riusciamo a applicare il regolamento di blocco che garantirebbe ai giudici di quella Corte di poter continuare a svolgere il proprio lavoro quando sono sotto attacco. Continuiamo a riceverli. Qui al Parlamento europeo non possono vivere, non possono lavorare o possono lavorare a scartamento ridotto. Non hanno più carte di credito, conti bancari, non hanno più la possibilità di accedere alle banche dati digitali controllate da multinazionali a base statunitense. Capite che costruire la difesa comune significa anche metterci in condizioni di avere reti digitali controllate dagli europei e gestita con spirito europeo, che è spirito di difesa dei principi fondamentali della nostra civiltà giuridica. La pace si fa così, non solo avviando piani di riarmo del nostro continente, della nostra Unione, che in questo momento, vogliamo dirlo, vagheggiamo cooperazioni rafforzate per una difesa che sia comune. In realtà stiamo finanziando o approvando e benedicendo il riarmo dei singoli Stati membri dell'Unione Europea, con una conversione potenziale e in parte già in atto dei nostri sistemi produttivi verso i sistemi militari. Io sono allarmato, è stato evocato in diverse circostanze in questi giorni anche l'uso degli strumenti come InvestEU, ma sapete che già era prevista la possibilità di declinarli in senso militare, ma si sta accentuando questo. Sono subissato di messaggi da parte dei ricercatori che lavorano sulle nuove frontiere del lavoro, della produzione, della ricerca, che mi dicono attenzione, anche la scienza aperta si sta chiudendo perché la stanno militarizzando e sospendiamo le cooperazioni tra università e segretiamo dei processi. Io credo che questo sia un momento in cui è chiesta una grande visione, una grande trasparenza e un grande coraggio. Quello di andare in direzione ostinata e contraria rispetto al ritorno della guerra al centro della politica e con il lavoro che è reso funzionale alla politica di guerra di questo tempo. Dobbiamo saper resistere a questo, a occhi aperti. Serve anche una costruzione, io lo dico per primo, di una difesa comune che è anche militare, per consentire l'autonomia strategica dell'Europa dagli altri grandi player globali, a cominciare dal grande alleato ingombrantissimo d'oltreatlantico. Abbiamo bisogno di essere alleati alla stessa altezza. Sono stato al centro un piccolo scandalo in campagna elettorale in Italia perché dicevo che la NATO era un'alleanza superata e lo stava dimostrando. Aspettiamo che venga un presidente degli Stati Uniti d'America, come ha fatto Trump nel primo mandato, a dirci che l'alleanza è in crisi, o come disse Macron allora è in stato di morte cerebrale. Ne abbiamo avuto la dimostrazione concreta con le minacce d'attacco alla Groenlandia, che è parte di un paese membro della NATO, con quello che sta accadendo nel Golfo senza che neanche fossero avvisati tutti i partner, con i loro sistemi produttivi messi a rischio dalla crisi energetica che è stata innescata. Questa non è un'alleanza, è una condizione drammatica di parità di sudditanza per certi versi. Quindi abbiamo bisogno anche di questo, ma dobbiamo farlo a occhi aperti e sapendo che se non coniughiamo la sicurezza sul lavoro con la sicurezza sociale, con la sicurezza a livello militare di difesa dei nostri cieli, non andiamo da nessuna parte. Io credo che questo sia il lavoro che debbano svolgere tutte le forze democratiche europeiste. La famiglia di cui faccio parte, alla famiglia di cui faccio parte lo chiedo con particolare intensità dall'inizio di questa legislatura e sono molto contento di vedere che oggi questi accenti si tornano a usare e queste proposte tornano a riavere cittadinanza. Per un po' l'abbiamo persa la bussola, non possiamo perderla per noi stessi e per il mondo. C'è un metodo Europa che è il capovolgimento delle ragioni della guerra, non l'adeguamento alle ragioni della guerra. E io conto molto sull'aiuto di persone, di donne e uomini come voi. Grazie di cuore per avermi invitato qui oggi a parlare. Sono stato nei 10 minuti.
Thank you very much over the timing. I mean, we took a slightly unusual path, waiting for Marco. So still, I would like to ask Isabelle and I would like to ask Professor van der Hoeven to deal with some of the issues that have been raised throughout the debate in this panel, because some were really clearly to you, some were of a bit more general nature. I mean, Marco, you might see from the reactions which things we have been already debating here, so still could give you some 2 minutes then after. If really you could get to 5 minutes, Isabelle, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for your questions. I've realized that probably I was talking too much about industry in general and maybe not specifically about the defense industry, which is also an industry that we are representing. I mean, it's not like any other industry, but at the end of the day, we also have a role to defend the interest of the defense workers. And also we see that what is happening has massive repercussions on other of our sectors. One thing I'd like to start with is that the debate that we are having here, we had it and we're still having it internally, because it's clear that we see a division across Europe. It's of course Eastern Europe, but not only. I mean, the Nordic countries also find themselves into a different situation. So this question of collective security is really important to address. But at the end of the day, for us, it's not only the question of the risk of an attack from wherever, actually. It's also the fact that it's this idea of security is also defending our own model. I mean, our own democratic, I mean, you've said it in the debate before. I mean, there is also attack on via social media, interference into elections. So it's more than attack on our territories. It's also a risk on our democracy that we have to defend ourselves. And this is why actually this notion of collective security is much more than defense spending. And I completely agree with the professor online. I mean, this is why we also need another social contract, because it's also about, and Rudy said it as well, it's not only about economic security, although, I mean, we do believe that from our perspective of industrial workers, it's absolutely essential that we are less dependent from global value chain, because we are also attacked on that. So it's really important, and this is why it is so important to have to very quickly deliver on our industrial ambition. And this is why, and it goes back to the remark of Florian, we also need to have the fiscal room for maneuver, because, I mean, it's one thing to have the policy, but if we don't have the capacity to invest, then we will be stuck. And as Judith said, I mean, we can't have trade-off here. And if you remember, Rearm Europe, the decision was made actually to activate the national escape clause only for this defense spending. This is not acceptable. What about, I mean, if we are only looking at investing into defense, we need the steel industry. I mean, we need the semiconductors. We need the chemicals products. So we need to have a much more holistic approach. Now, regarding the conversion, because this is also a very big topic. And it's difficult, because out of the 20 sectors that we are representing, only 2 are now booming. It's aerospace and shipbuilding. And these 2 sectors are linked to defense. So we see that. But we also know that, I mean, as someone said, this is not sustainable. We know that in the long run, this is not sustainable. So we have to find a way also of ensuring our own capabilities, defense capabilities, but also in a smarter way. I mean, there is a lot of discussion about dual use, for instance, because at the end of the day, security is not only the tanks, but it's also the firefighter, because we also have issues with fire in summer. So we have to have a much broader approach of how we ensure our collective security. And to be fair, I mean, it's also our reality, the capacity actually to reconvert yes, there are some good examples, I mean, some examples that are presented, but this whole idea that we convert one industry in another, I think there is very limited possibilities to do that. So I mean, let's be clear: defense industry is not going to save the European industry. Also, because if you look at the scale, I mean, if maybe on a yearly basis you would produce 30 tanks, I mean, you cannot compare it with the millions of cars that are produced on a yearly basis. So, I mean, we have to actually move towards a much more sustainable approach of our economic model.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Now I turn to Professor van der Hoeven for his kind of response reaction. 5 minutes also for you. Thank you very much. Because, I mean, his perspective, I mean, was very nicely complementing what we are talking here about, because we should get to some kind of weight out of the situation, which is really rather depressive than encouraging. And I mean, aiming to really, let's sit all together, let's reconsider how to get out of the situation, get the new optimism, impetus for further development. That's something we also need to hear from the academic circles. Okay. So, Professor van der Hoeven
is back.
5 minutes for you, please, for your kind of reaction on the debate you have been following. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very useful debate, and I'm also pleased by the various interventions. I want to make a first remark. I fully underscore what Rudy and Pascal and others have said about the multilateral system. I think the EU should also be very strong on the multilateral system. I'm on the board of the United Nations Committee for Development Policy, and it's also one of our biggest concerns. Second question is, several people have raised that about the fiscal constraint, the budget deficits, maximum budget deficit. Always have to remind that the budget deficit is it's expenditure, but also income. And I think a part of a social contract is also, if a country or a continent is in threat, then there need also to be a discussion about increasing taxes. We have seen how quick economies could deal with that. If we see Britain and the United States in the Second World War, very high tax rates and very active investment in the defense industry. I think that warrants a good discussion. For the moment, we can temporarily increase the budget deficit, but it should not be on a long-term basis. That should become by solidarity taxes. In the Second World War, the marginal tax rates in several countries were 80 to 90%. And I think we need to be thinking about increasing marginal tax rates. Another point is the social stability. I'm glad that other people join me in saying that we really need to go back to a social contract, which include also the situation of defense and the situations of workers. And another point is the investment in science. Several people made that also. We can make very quick advances in science. I think our suffering colleagues in Ukraine have shown if countries are under threat, they can make very big advantages in science. And thirdly, that's more a general point of view. If we now invest in defense industry, I think we should not be ashamed of that. I think it's I'm with all maybe the most people in the room. I think it's really important, especially as we see now for colleagues in Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, etc. There is a real threat, And I think we need, we cannot argue that if we have now a defense industry that it is not a good investment. I think it is a necessary investment, but it has to be part of a social contract. It has to be part of the starkest shoulders also bearing the burden of that. And I think we need to have also with political parties in the European Parliament really going very strong for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Marco, if you would like to have 2 minutes, but really just 2 minutes, I cut you off then. It's yours.
Grazie Presidente. Sì, non bisogna vergognarsi di pensare anche alla difesa. Io dico che se fosse difesa comune per davvero e se i processi che sono avviati, imprecisi, molti, prendessero forma, si tratterebbe dell'unica impresa che ha dentro strutturalmente anche una quota di disarmo. Perché se prendiamo le cifre che già oggi vengono investite nell'industria delle armi, nella dimensione militare della difesa, come ho detto prima e come mi pare di cogliere avete ampiamente analizzato anche in precedenza, è con diversi aspetti, un poliedro che abbraccia diversi aspetti, come il concetto di sicurezza, allora ha dentro strutturalmente una quota di disarmo, perché significa anche economie di scala, riorganizzazione, possono esserci degli investimenti iniziali, ma poi c'è un processo di dimagrimento. Già oggi noi spendiamo, sono calcoli che hanno fatto diversi economisti, circa il 19% in più come paesi europei aggregati di quello che spende la Russia, che è in economia di guerra. E questo dovrebbe darci da riflettere. Se poi confrontiamo i dati a livello globale ci rendiamo conto che il nostro sistema, ammesso che si possa ancora parlare di un sistema occidentale, siamo la magna parte del mondo. Io penso che ci siano almeno 2 occidenti, che noi europei siamo un altro occidente. Dobbiamo saperlo essere anche indicando le strade giuste. Avevamo cominciato a farlo dal mio punto di vista con quello che forse doveva essere chiamato il piano industriale europeo ed è stato chiamato Green Deal e che oggi è messo violentemente in discussione. Ma quella è un'industria che prepara la pace con il mondo nel quale viviamo, con gli altri sistemi indica una strada per una crescita sostenibile. Non, posso dirlo con un vecchio presidente italiano? Un conto è riempire gli arsenali e un conto riempire i granai per il futuro e per le nuove generazioni. Se l'Europa sceglie con chiarezza, ancora oggi è in discussione, nel Parlamento europeo è in discussione, la maggioranza europeista vacilla ogni volta che affrontiamo questi temi, quando sono i temi della difesa dell'ambiente e dell'uguale opportunità tra le persone, quelle che qui risiedono e sono europei per tradizioni e quelle che sono europei per convinzione, per scelta o per forza, perché sono costretti a emigrare da altre parti del mondo. La grande sfida è questa. L'Europa è questo, è la composizione delle differenze e anche la scelta delle priorità. Io credo che questo sia il compito che grava sulle nostre spalle, tenendo conto che il lavoro sta cambiando e sta cambiando rapidamente. L'ho accennato anche oggi nell'incontro che abbiamo avuto con il gruppo di cui faccio parte, con una parte di questo consesso. La sfida dell'intelligenza artificiale, che è una sfida anche positiva, con contenuti positivi, ci sta dicendo che nei prossimi anni vedremo cambiare rapidamente sia l'organizzazione sia il lavoro, sia il ruolo delle uomini e delle donne dentro i luoghi del lavoro. Allora, o si realizza qualcosa per cui c'è una liberazione delle persone, oppure c'è irrimediabilmente la marginalizzazione e la concentrazione della mano di sempre meno persone, del controllo e della ricchezza che è generata da questi processi. Anche qui l'Europa deve indicare la strada. Abbiamo cominciato a farlo in senso difensivo, dobbiamo sviluppare politiche proattive anche da questo punto di vista e di questo cominciamo a ragionare. Abbiamo bisogno della scienza, del mondo del lavoro e del mondo dell'impresa consapevole per fare questo. Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the 3 speakers. Extremely interesting. Thank you. And we are moving to our last panel. The timing is still so-so. Lovely. So let me invite Béla Galgóczi to the podium for the panel. Thank you so much. So Béla Galgóczi for the panel, Increasing Defense Budgets and Impact on Welfare State. So, Béla, we know each other, I'm not going to say for how many years, but for decades already. So happy to have you here for this part. We are having Gábor Márk Pellényi from DG ECFIN from the Commission, and Patrick Kaczmarczyk from Mannheim University, virtually. Happy to have him virtually. Welcome. Good to see you. Hello. Happy to have you here. Thank you. So basically, Béla, I would like you to focus on industrial policy contexts, but also the trade-offs that emerge with shifting spending priorities, possibly, and something like 5 minutes, because you see people are eager to debate, and I am extremely happy for that, because debates and clarification, that's what we need. So please go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay. Actually, I have a few slides. I don't know if I send it, but if it's kind of... Yeah, good. I will show only a few graphs, so don't worry. So, thank you again, really. What I would really like to say first, hearing also the exciting debate, that we really have to realize that the world has changed. And in this situation, Europe seems to be lost. I mean, we lost the United States. Yeah? It's actually United States is not a partner, so we cannot even speak about the West. There is no West anymore. Of course, we can hope that this will change, but it is, and that's a big thing. At the same time, of course, Russia is, with its aggression against Ukraine, and the threat to Europe is another extreme threat. And then we have China with its economic power and its technology, innovation capacity that is kind of threatening, or at least putting a big challenge to the European industrial basis. So in this constellation, Europe is, well, in a way lost, yeah? And therefore, I think it's not a choice to invest more in the defense and be prepared, but in this particular situation, when multilateralism collapsed, there is threat on our borders. The United States is not anymore ready to provide defense services. There is at least, well, it's not a choice, yeah. But of course, this, on the other hand, is putting a huge pressure also on on Europe's. So I would like to move it. Is there a trick to move it?
Normally it works.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah, there is something.
Yeah, with this one. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so this means, of course, that we have huge fiscal conflicts and budgetary conflicts at the same time when those are also extremely narrow, because already in the context of the green transformation, we are having a huge investment gap. So what I would like to show here first, that, well, this is kind of an investment gap for all countries and Europe, which is adding up the challenges. So going up on the scale, like Slovakia, which is on the left side, is almost at 10%, means that according to the fiscal rules, the country needs to consolidate its budget. This is one part of that. That is, well, this is the yellow, which is actually, there is no... then there is a defense gap, there is a climate change investment gap, and there is the demographic aging gap. And these are adding together and piling up. And all of Europe is at the Eurozone average, it is 5% of the GDP. And this is massive. This is huge. And then you have to think about, okay, so what is the priority? Is it kind of the social spending, the welfare, defense, or actually the climate, which actually I would say the climate, if you talk about the climate, it is not just about the climate. It is about the existence of the European industrial ecosystem, because now decarbonizing is the way to have a competitive economy. Otherwise, it is only China that provides that. So we have to catch up on that. And this costs a lot. Yeah? So if only the electricity grid would take €1 trillion in the next 10 years. So these are massive investment needs. And then this is an overview of expenditure and social benefits where we are. Yeah? So where, of course, the differences are huge between countries, but it's on average, it's, well, 26% of the GDP is actually on, so to say, welfare, social spending. But half of that is pensions. Yeah? So it's actually the pension system is the biggest item, and this is, all necessary, and we are also underspending in many areas, and especially the future-oriented ones, so education and health, and then there is then we have the defense, and well, the defense spending, whether it is well 3.5% or so as an objective. Some countries, for example, Poland, is like really going up. It's between 4 and 5% already. That creates conflicts. Yes, that creates conflicts, and it is certainly clear that this kind of imposed fiscal discipline that Europe had put on itself is stretching its limits, and of course we cannot spend in an unlimited way, but there are strategic choices to be made, and these are not. And one issue is certainly the how we interpret defense. Yeah, so the dual use, is it electricity grids can be seen as dual use? So there is a lot of overlap there, and you can probably have a little bit of room of maneuver, but it is difficult. And the last thing I would like to say, I'm sure that I have to finish, yes. that what we are doing now in terms of industrial policy is extremely defensive. So because the problem is that we have really good targets and very ambitious targets, both in climate policy but also in industrial policy terms. But the targets are only targets, and we don't have the resources to reach these targets. And in this situation, what is called competitiveness now has become a deregulatory and simplification agenda and nothing more, and that is really a problem. So and then while we are losing competitiveness, definitely vis-à-vis China, also US in technology, then one reaction is to defend what we have. But that is okay, and we need to have made in Europe and all that, but it's not enough because we have to catch up and we have to innovate and invest, and that is again cost money. So it's a difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Béla. We immediately move, Gábor, to you on basically how, what, and where to spend in defense and the effects, so the economic forecast, effect of GDP investments in defense, depending on purpose, origin of the company, and so on. It would be nice if 5-6 minutes would be appropriate.
Sure, thank you very much. I also prepared a few slides. I hope we can put them on the screen and then the discussion will be easier. Thank you. So this is based on analysis we published last year in the spring economic forecast of the European Commission, and then another report came out later last year, also elaborating on the impact of defense spending. My first point to make is that defense spending in the EU is geared towards wages and other types of current expenditure. Comparatively less money is spent on purchasing equipment. In the EU, just 0.4% of GDP is defense equipment procurement. In the US, it's around 1% of GDP annually. So overall, this means that the EU defense sector is smaller because it services a smaller market than in the US. And also this market is, as some already mentioned in the debate, quite fragmented across countries. So this leads to a higher cost of procuring equipment, and also high import dependence on the US, because for certain types of defense goods, European producers just don't exist. This is particularly the case for air defense, for example, which, as we have seen in the last years, has become a very critical item of military equipment and military spending. Turning a bit to the economic channels, how defense spending affects economic growth. The first thing I'd like to briefly discuss is the typical traditional channels of the Keynesian mechanism. When we increase government spending, defense spending, or any other kind of government spending really, this leads to higher demand, higher employment in the short term, but of course in the longer term this also increases prices, which then requires the central bank to increase interest rates, reducing private investment. So in the short term there is a boost, in the long term there is a contractionary impact. And then if this spending takes place over a longer period and people are already aware that it needs to be financed by higher taxes in the future, then the economic impact in the short term can also be much weaker, because people will just save the extra income to prepare for higher future taxes. The other channel, which is probably less emphasized, is through research and development and innovation. Defense R&D can also have positive spillovers in the private sector. There are many examples for this. For example, GPS navigation systems were initially a military application, but now they are used everywhere, smartphones, etc. But I can also give a funnier example. The Swiss Army knife was originally a military tool, but now we use it to open bottles of wine and cans of tuna. So you can think of several examples where really military innovation then spills over to the private sector and then becomes utilized there. And the advantage of these innovation projects is that they are quite mission-oriented, goal-oriented, so the resources can be more focused on achieving the actual results. And this is why in several cases you have quite wide or far-reaching effects on the economy. Now, the simulations that we did were based on a few assumptions. First of all, we assumed that defense spending would increase by 1.5% of GDP. This, at the time, was in line with the increase in NATO target and the shortfall of certain member states compared to this target. So that's what we modeled. We assumed that by 2028, this higher spending level would be reached, initially financed by debt, so bond issuance, but in the long term, spending and revenues must adjust to accommodate this higher defense spending level. So the simple assumption was that taxes would adjust to ensure that government debt is sustainable at a higher level. We accounted for very modest productivity spillovers because this is what we historically see in Europe. Defense R&D spending is quite low. And we assumed an import share of 20% for the additional defense spending. Some would say it's large, some would say it's small. It's very uncertain to measure the actual import dependence because many of the contracts are classified, so we don't have a lot of reliable information. And also, we can assume that some of the extra spending will indeed be on either domestic construction or higher salaries for military personnel, etc. But then, in the main scenario, we see that there is some modest positive impact on the level of EU GDP. On the long term, this is something like 0.3% as a level effect, so not very huge, especially in comparison to the impact on government debt, which is increasing by 5 percentage points of GDP. So if you look at it simply from a economic stimulus perspective, this is probably not the most efficient way to help the economy. But then we also looked at different scenarios with alternative assumptions for import requirement and productivity spillovers. Obviously, if more of the spending is geared on equipment procured from outside Europe, then the domestic economic impact is even smaller, and we end up stimulating the US economy, basically. On the other hand, if there are higher productivity spillovers, then the long-term economic benefits could be more considerable. Still, as you can see on the right-hand side, the fiscal challenge is considerable. Now, the SAFE instrument can help member states to adjust a bit because it provides financing at a favorable rate for the pickup in defense expenditure, but this only postpones the more difficult decisions about how to ensure fiscal sustainability with a persistently higher level of defense spending. And I leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this insight. And we are moving immediately to our last speaker, Patrick Kaczmarczyk from Mannheim University, where it would be nice to hear from you about the effects and limitations of the fiscal multiplier effects of defense expenditure. Again, it would be nice if we could get into some 5-6 minutes. Floor is yours, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you very much for your invitation. I really appreciate what Gábor just said, because I can perfectly basically start with what he was saying. So we looked specifically at the context in Germany, where we have adopted the 5% target. The earmarked budget will more than double within a very short period of time. And we had the discussion here whether or not it generates growth and leads to more jobs. And I mean, most of the findings that we had are very consistent with what has just been presented. In order to keep it fairly short, I can skip through some of the developments of military spending that we had based on different definitions of military spending, based on different classifications. We have looked at the individual budget plans, and similarly to what have been just said, a very large share of that is just pure consumptive expenditure, even with the kind of most wide definition of what could be classified as an investment, such as I don't know, subsidies for the German railway system, with part of it, which is also within the Einzelplan 14, which is the defense budget from the government. We included that as kind of investment in the military, but even there we have very, very low shares compared to the consumptive investment. And of course, what we need to consider also is that, as opposed to other kind of like capital goods, like machines, for example, which increase productivity of certain firms, or investments in infrastructure, which provide benefits to a whole range of enterprises, the output in the military sector is basically of little use to the wider economy. We did have issues with data scarcity, so we kind of had to look at the defense companies that are publicly listed. And what we see here basically is that their share prices have skyrocketed, so have their dividends. And what is very interesting, I think, is that when we look at the different evolutions in point of time, so for example, after the onset of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, we had some modest gains for stock companies, but the real explosion followed after our Bundeschancellor Olaf Scholz at that time announced the Zeitenwende and the 100 billion Sondervermögen, so special fund for military investments. And similarly, what we had was that after the election and the announcement of the debt brake reform, where we basically opened up, we basically got rid of all restrictions on military spending, which exceed 1% of GDP. This was again when share prices massively increased. And when a share price increases by a factor of 20, you can translate that to expectations on financial markets, right? What does it mean if the valuation of a company goes up by a factor of 20? It means that discounted future cash flows that will be distributed, they rise by a factor of 20, and that can either mean a increase of production volumes by the factor of 20, or a significant increase in the profit margins. And I think also considering the development of the dividends, this is what we see based on that type of rearmament that we have. In terms of the literature, it was just mentioned. I just briefly underline the main points. In the US, we tend to have higher fiscal multiplier effects than in Europe. In Germany, we do have the constraining factors that we have very high capacity utilization rates in that sector. It's the only sector that is booming, and of course it's also expanding, but not nearly enough considering the amount of money that is being poured into the sector, so that it primarily drives prices. We have very inefficient and intransparent procurement procedures. Again, we're part of the European fragmented market, which makes it difficult to buy at scale. We don't have very intensive competition in the market, comparatively high imports, especially in the high-end sector of defense spending. Low share of R&D, so we said that the multiplier would not be higher than 0.5, and this is considering that the rest of the industry is doing very, very badly. From the literature, what we can also see is that it is not that much of a jobs engine, because it's very skill intensive, and it tends to come at much higher costs per job than investments in other sectors. In terms of R&D spillovers, I mean, this is an ongoing debate. I mean, there are examples like the Internet, GPS, DARPA, where the kind of like mission-oriented industrial policy leads to positive spillovers in the wider economy. Other research is a little bit more cautious on the general spillover effects, because first of all, it neglects the opportunity cost in terms of investments in the civil sector. What are the returns of R&D there? And what we see also in key segments, especially in AI, is that in recent years, it also seems to be somewhat of a change that you generate more spillovers from the civil sector to the military sector. So in terms of the implications for Germany, structural reforms in that sense should be absolutely prioritized. Otherwise, we risk not really increasing our capabilities significantly, but achieving that at a very, very high fiscal cost. So there must be more coming through the European level. And I think considering the side effects that it otherwise would have, it's absolutely key to strengthen European procurement and defense. More emphasis on diplomacy. I mean, I'm not sure how it goes in Europe at large, but at least in Germany, we had the debate, and our German president actually emphasized it very nicely in his speech yesterday, that he said that we lived in a world where we believed that everything could be achieved through diplomacy without the necessary military strength. And now we seem to have gone into the other direction, where everything seems to be solved by military strength and no weight is put on diplomacy. So he called for a rebalancing of that strategy, which I would personally agree. We cannot neglect other key sectors of the economy of the future. Otherwise, the industrial base, which also underpins, of course, military capacities, will be significantly weakened. And what we also call, in the end, is eventually public ownership stakes in the defense sector to especially lower the information asymmetries that exist between the state and private firms. All right, so this was my short presentation. I'm happy to not share my screen anymore and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. So it was rather a kind of fiscal panel, but with the macroeconomic impacts on the different dimensions. So, of course, we are opening the floor. Already I can see you. I can see Christian. Florian.
Susanne.
We are not actually, you know, giving any points, you know, for participation in all the debates. I'm joking, of course. I've got Aurélie, I've got Christian, I've got Florian, I've got Susanne on my list. Anyone else for the debate for the moment? It's not the case, so Aurélie, please go ahead.
Thank you,
With a reasonable time frame.
Yes, I will speak in French. Merci pour vos interventions. Alors, je trouve que c'est très intéressant d'avoir souligné le rôle que peuvent jouer les dépenses en matière de défense dans la recherche et développement et l'innovation plus large pour la société. On connaît effectivement le rôle qu'a pu jouer la DARPA pour un certain nombre de secteurs, et c'est pas Elon Musk qui vous contredira. Après, j'avoue que pour une Française où le budget de recherche et développement pour la recherche publique n'a jamais atteint 3%, parler de 5% du PIB investi dans la défense, ça paraît considérable. Vos interventions montrent bien, de mon point de vue, l'importance de la conditionnalité sociale et environnementale des marchés publics, des aides d'État, des fonds européens. Et si là, on parle d'investir 5% dans la défense, encore plus, mais aussi d'un changement de paradigme fiscal, puisque si l'Europe a bénéficié des dividendes de la paix, il ne faudrait pas comme notre chercheur de Mannheim vient de le montrer, que les dividendes de la guerre soient accaparés par quelques grandes entreprises, d'autant plus si elles ne sont pas forcément européennes. En termes d'acceptabilité sociale, ça me paraîtrait totalement impossible dans ces cas-là que les citoyens européens puissent accepter qu'on sacrifie le modèle social, l'avenir des travailleurs et de la jeunesse pour enrichir quelques-uns. Du coup, ma question, c'est est-ce que on a beaucoup entendu parler récemment du Made in Europe, dont la physionomie est à géométrie variable, selon qu'il s'agirait de privilégier les productions et les achats européens. Et donc peut-être que dans ce cas, on subventionnerait moins le PIB américain, ou selon qu'il s'agit de poser un Made in Europe qui serait en fait un Made with European Values, ou avec des États membres, des États avec lesquels l'Europe a des accords. Donc on voit que c'est encore flou, mais est-ce que cette perspective est susceptible de changer les projections que vous venez de nous faire? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Christian, please go ahead.
Thanks for the floor. I will continue in German. Ich habe mich angesprochen gefühlt, als Lucie in dem Panel davor darauf hingewiesen hat, dass manchmal auch eine Frage der geografischen Lage ist, wie man auf dieses Thema reagiert. Also da sind natürlich die Menschen, die im Baltikum wohnen, oder die Menschen, die in Polen leben, in einer anderen Situation, als wenn man etwas weiter entfernt von einer möglichen Frontlinie ist. Und was Deutschland angeht, so ist es so, falls Putins Streitkräfte in Polen stehen sollten, stehen sie vor Berlin. Das ist dann auch relativ nah. Und ich denke, dass alle Länder, die einmal in dem sowjetischen Imperium drin waren, also ein Teil des sowjetischen Imperiums drin waren, da zumindest in Teilen eine größere Sensibilität haben und eine größere Notwendigkeit der Verteidigung sehen. Dabei ist es natürlich Geld, was man anderswo viel besser einsetzen könnte. Ausgaben im Bereich der frühkindlichen Bildung haben eine viel größere Hebelwirkungen. Auch Gesundheitsausgaben können viel mehr bewirken, wenn man an Arzneimittel und Ähnliches denkt. Da gibt ja Deutschland sehr viel dafür aus. Aber das ändert nichts an Notwendigkeiten, die bestehen, eine Verteidigung aufzubauen. Ich denke, dass es wichtig ist, dass man hier nicht sozialen Zusammenhalt und Verteidigungsfähigkeit gegeneinander ausspielt, denn ohne sozialen Zusammenhalt gibt es auch keine Verteidigung. Aber beides müssen wir eben hinbekommen. Nach meiner Ansicht geht das nur dadurch, dass man Steuern erhöht und diejenigen auch in die Verantwortung mit einbezieht, die auch durch Börsengewinne sehr viel Geld eingenommen haben in den letzten Jahren. Das heißt, da müssen wir nach meiner Auffassung ansetzen. Wenn ich ein Letztes sagen darf, da ich ja schon die Nachbarn Deutschlands angesprochen habe. Für mich wäre es eigentlich sehr wichtig, wenn wir zu einer engeren Zusammenarbeit zwischen den europäischen Ländern, gerade auch im militärischen Bereich, kommen. Allein schon deswegen, weil ich manchmal auch ein wenig irritiert bin, wenn Bundeskanzler Friedrich Merz davon spricht, dass Deutschland die größte konventionelle Armee Europas bekommen sollte. Das weckt bei mir auch ein paar unangenehme Assoziationen. Da würde ich eher sagen, es wäre schön, wenn wir zum Beispiel zusammen mit Polen unsere Verteidigung gemeinsam organisieren könnten. Dankeschön.
Thanks a lot. Florian, please.
Thank you so much. I will use my mother tongue since I'm seeing that I have this possibility in order to be faster. Sorry. Sunt două elemente pe care vreau să le aduc în discuție. În primul rând, antevorbitorul meu a menționat că locația geografică este importantă și, într-adevăr, este foarte importantă, pentru că nu este numai de a produce mai mult din punct de vedere militar. Sunt anumite state europene care se confruntă cu capacități de producție militară care sunt închise și rămân închise tocmai pentru că acest joc geopolitic presupune inclusiv îngreunarea procesului de înarmare. Vă pot da exemple concrete din țara mea în care chiar de dimineață 1000 de oameni au rămas fără loc de muncă, o capacitate de producție inclusiv militară la Marea Neagră, pentru că avem un război la Marea Neagră. Cum Europa își păzește interesele și cum aceste inițiative care vizează, nu știu, Marea Neagră, inițiativa celor 3 mări, putem discuta mult despre aceste subiecte, produc efecte în realitate, e bine, e cu totul și cu totul altă discuție. Un alt element pe care vreau, și este o întrebare aceasta, de ce este atât de greu să consolidăm regulamentul offset? Pentru că asistăm, cel puțin pentru țările din Est, la o contraofertă față de ce livrează Comisia Europeană și instituțiile europene în momentul de față. Asistăm la propuneri extrem de interesante din punct de vedere economic în sistem dual use din partea unor state precum Statele Unite. O contraofertă concurentă cu ceea ce livrează în momentul de față Bruxelles, care pune cel puțin inclusiv organizațiile sindicale într-o dificultate. Și anume păstrăm locurile de muncă utilizând bani americani, de exemplu, pentru producția de armament, dar nu numai armament. Discutăm și de centre de date și discutăm și de hub-uri de AI, care în momentul de față sunt în discuții cu state din Est, sau acceptăm, mergem pe drumul proiectului european. Problema nu este numai de înarmare și relația cu social aspect. Problema este și legată de faptul că avem o concurență între ceea ce Bruxelles livrează în momentul de față către statele membre. Este important să ne menținem Uniunea în proiectul european. Iar pentru asta rolul sindicatelor este imperativ necesar. Îmi cer scuze. De ce este atât de greu să consolidăm offset-ul? Mulțumesc frumos.
Thank you very much. Susanne, please.
Ich habe 2 Fragen an Herrn Kaczmarczyk. Eine ganz kurze, nämlich einfach nur eine Aufklärungsfrage. Woher kommt der so unterschiedliche Multiplikatoreffekt zwischen USA und Deutschland? Das ist ja doch irgendwie erheblich. Aber die politisch aus meiner Sicht spannendere Frage ist, nun ist die Universität Mannheim, wird ja gelegentlich auch gehört in öffentlichen Debatten. Welchen Eindruck haben Sie davon, wie Ihre Implikationen dort besprochen werden? Also da geht es ja sozusagen, was Sie vorgetragen haben, auch um Europäisierung von Verteidigungsstrategien und vor allen Dingen vom Beschaffungswesen, stärkere Ausrichtung Diplomatie, das haben Sie gerade schon mit Herrn Steinmeier irgendwie beantwortet, aber auch sozusagen der Frage nach viel stärkerer öffentlicher Ownership, also öffentlichem Eigentum in Verteidigungsfragen. Also die Frage ist, wie ist Ihre Einschätzung, wie werden Ihre Vorschläge da drin und auch Ihre empirischen Befunde eigentlich in der deutschen Debatte aufgenommen, weil zugegebenermaßen an mir sind sie nämlich bisher vorbeigegangen. Das mag aber an mir liegen.
Thank you very much for all these questions, comments. I would go back to the panelists, to the speakers, starting, Patrick, with you. There were just 2 concrete questions towards you. You can also reflect from the debate what you would find interesting. Now we go for 4 minutes, no more, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for the questions. I will try to go through them very quickly, starting with the last one. So the main difference to the US is that, first of all, the US has a very large market. They can produce at scale. They have much higher shares of exports, and they have much higher shares of R&D. So in that sense, fiscal multipliers are higher, although I wouldn't really see the US as the role model to follow up, because it is such a highly militarized state, which now turns also against its own citizens, I think, at least in part. But in terms of economic efficacy, they are, of course, due to these factors, they produce better results. Although again, it's a question, what would happen if they would invest that money into other civil sectors? I think in terms of well-being, there might be a lot more social well-being and stability in the US as a whole. In terms of the impression of whether or not we are being heard, we were among the first that were actually saying, look, there won't be an economic miracle, a Wirtschaftswunder due to the rearmament, because I mean this was the tone that was set by a research study coming out from Kiel, which basically said that multiplier effects are much higher. We looked at the literature and said exactly what also our colleague here from the Commission said, that in Europe these effects are negligible due to the things we talked about. And then the Sachverständigenrat, so the Council of Economic Experts, came out with a different methodology. They looked at time series data and they found a multiplier effect of 0.4, so they were very close to our kind of like broad-based literature derived indicator. And we actually said there is no alternative then to do it via the European way. Otherwise, you risk not only undermining economic stability, but also social stability. And then you might get parties into parliament with such a majority that they will have to form part of government in some point, which will say, you know, Russia is our best friend, we don't need to rearm, and then Russia has won without firing a single shot, right? So in our sense, it is highly important to underline that. My personal impression from discussions with policymakers is that they say, oh, in Europe, I mean, everybody is just going after their own national interests. They kind of like excluded ex ante that this could be a better way. And they say, yeah, if there is no other way than doing it in this very inefficient way, we're doing it that way. So in that sense, we're still working on getting our message through, but it's very, very hard. I don't want to deny that. And one comment on Europe first, so that we don't end up subsidizing American production. I think this is absolutely key. And I would also underline that we need to go for made in Europe and not made with Europe, because with some of the partners, you don't really know in which way they will evolve. You know, taking India as an example. And apart from that, we need the capabilities in Europe. If we want to have strategic autonomy, we need the capabilities here. And if it takes time and money, then so be it. But we definitely have to do it in Europe. So I'm not sure if I still have a minute or a few seconds left.
20 seconds.
20 seconds. Well, in terms of tax increases for financing defense spending, I would support that. But again, coming from inside talks in Berlin, I mean, it's no secret. It's politically incredibly difficult to push anything through that wouldn't have damaging effects on consumption, on the middle class. And this also could erode political social stability in Germany. So in terms of policy proposal, I would say that would be a good idea, a smart idea, but it would have to be done in a way that it doesn't suffocate or harm aggregate demand. And as a consequence, this means targeting those households with very high savings rate, very high wealth, income, etc. And this, is politically very difficult.
Thank you very much. Pretty clear. Gábor, 4 minutes for you.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with the previous remarks. I think the joint procurement is quite crucial. It can drive down procurement costs for all, and it can also improve cooperation between armies of member states, because right now in Europe we have, I think, around a dozen different tanks, models used by the different armies. In the US there is just one. So that improves the logistics greatly and enhances cooperation. So there are many advantages to joint procurement. And I think these counter-offers by the US, which some EU member states are getting, is a signal that the US perceives this joint procurement as a threat to their own defense companies, because it would greatly enhance the competitiveness of the European ones. And then my other point would come back to the long-term effects taxation. Of course, there are reasons to adjust the tax system to make it fairer. At the same time, in general, the economic literature says that taxes have a relatively high multiplier effect on the economy, meaning that they tend to be more negative for long-term growth. So these tax reforms should be carefully calibrated to preserve investment, to preserve labor supply, and then indeed we can achieve a good balance between fairness, fiscal sustainability, but also long-term growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Béla.
Thank you. I will be really short. Reflecting on the debate in general. So first of all, I mean, I would like to emphasize again that it's not a choice, this kind of enhanced military spending. It's very unfortunate, but this is how the world is, and at least to some extent, Europe was pushed into this situation. And the link to diplomacy, yes, of course, the aim is actually diplomacy, but in diplomacy, what happens is that Europe has no credibility. It lost its power, so to say, and somehow the whole defense thing is not so much about using this. Nobody really wants to use all this stuff, but it's kind of a deterrent, some potential. It's quite crazy, the whole thing, but this is where we are, and it was not a choice, and this is seeing all these low spillover effects and the very small effect on employment also. This is absolutely not a choice. This would have been so much easier or better do it directly. Invest in social, invest in green technologies, and so on and so on. So it's and so this is how I see it. On the procurement, and it is really, this is the most obvious thing to do. That is, this fragmentation in Europe is a hurdle for almost everything. Yeah? And this is true also for defense and for procurement. This really urgently needs to be done together. And it's not only the procurement, but also the development. So if you think about the fighter jet case, the FCAS, yeah, 100 billion euros project, and the French and the German cannot agree on that. And we will end up with buying American fighters. So it is really not how we should do that. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, even the last panel, extremely interesting and extremely rich, also from your contributions and questions and comments. So thank you all, you two here, and Patrick on remote. I'm actually not going to have any wonderful, brilliant, wise concluding remarks, and I'm not even going to summarize the debate, because these were so many different dimensions and angles and views on the issue, from very concrete impact on our colleagues working in the defense industry, on the impact and the dilemma, or not dilemma, but a kind of forced dilemma, either security or social progress or social well-being, to the fiscal impacts. Béla now basically not being that clear, but for me it's clear. We are again facing a crisis which again shows that we, for me at least, should use the opportunity and to be a bit more serious in completing the EU project as such. Because now we are losing in minor things. In the near future, we might be losing the project as such, being really attacked by the different far-righters, just working for their own benefit and not for the people here in Europe, offering simple and easy solutions, which are not solutions. Basically, there's a lot we would need to be discussing. I mean, the elephant in the room, the pacifistic approach, the armament approach. Where is the balance there? How to get back to rule-based world, which we are for the moment losing? Are we at the brink of really major change? Technological changes coming rapidly, crisis with the different wars here, worsening, I would say, normal level of living for the normal people. Are we there? Are we there yet or not? As I mentioned already this morning with the S&D Group, if this is the case, and my kind of perception, my nose tell me I still might experience it, we need to be there. Representatives of working people and progressive forces just need to be there at the table, creating and shaping the conditions for fairer, better, more decent life of our members and of all the people. Let me conclude by this. As usually, you will receive all the presentations, all the PowerPoint presentations, because they are interesting. There's a lot of data, a lot of different angles in there, so for you to use it. And by that, let me well, I'm a bit done. Let me thank all the panelists, all the speakers. Let me thank all of you for extremely engaged and committed interest and debate, because that's what brings us further on. Let me thank the interpreters. You did have a lovely day with us, I can imagine. And let me thank the Secretariat, of course, because without them, it wouldn't work. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed and see you soon at some point. I don't know when, but definitely at the next plenary. Thank you.